paper out. All of you are going to have the instinct that you're really going to want to have a timer going. Try to resist that instinct. If you want to follow along with time allocation, that's fine, but make sure that the timer doesn't go off. So make it silent. You got like a timer on your phone, or you can turn it to vibrate. We don't want like 8 million timers going off during the debate. That's very annoying. A lot of you are going to have the instinct that you're going to want to talk to one another during the debate. So you're going to want to, Sharon will say something, and you'll be like, "Whoa, did you hear what she just said? That was so awesome." Don't do that, because everyone else is trying to listen.
Probably won't be an opportunity.
If 100 people are talking during the debate. So during the debate will be quiet time. Between the speeches will be quiet time. There will be some discussion. Please pay attention and flow. Think about the debate. We'll try to help you with some specific suggestions about what to think about. But it's really important that everyone takes this seriously, because the more people that are here, the easier it is for just a couple of people to ruin it for everybody else. So take a moment. Just think, all right, I could either be really loud and annoying, or I can just be quiet. I'm going to choose the latter, even though it's difficult. Just take a moment. Get to that mental place. This is being recorded. If you say something really stupid, it'll be recorded forever. Even if you don't want to just be good for respectful reasons, be good for self-respect. All right, we are having a demonstration debate. That videotape will be on the internet, thanks to Ricardo, who has got an awesome setup here. We got this cool snowball mic. We got this awesome HD thing. Let's give a round of applause for Ricardo. Very excited about that. Representing the affirmative, both originally from the great state of Iowa, now representing the great University of Iowa, Sharon, Kann, and Liam Hancock. Round of applause for them. Representing the negative, originally from the great state of Illinois and the great state of Pennsylvania, now representing Michigan State University and the University of Mary Washington, Margaret Strong and Colin McElhinny. Round of applause. Like I said, you need 8 sheets of paper. If you're not there yet, now's the time. 8 sheets of paper.
Maybe 9.
Maybe 9?
I'm going to move your bag now.
Is that a real thing? Do they actually do 9?
Relations advantage is
Relations advantage get pretty hefty.
Yeah, if
You
you
might
flow.
need 9. So if you're at 8 right now, get one more if you can. Help each other out. If you need help on the paper, raise your hand. Everybody else look around, find the people that are raising their hand, help them out with the paper.
Bill, do we have it?
What?
Do we have it?
Yeah, or at least everyone.
Missing like 10 groups.
Oh.
I think most of them are 6. Alright. See what you just did there? The process of getting paper turned into the process of talking about dinner and talking about whatever, and we got very loud. So that was a good example of what not to do.
Paid attention to that?
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
I'm a dessert.
Apparently.
I'll help you do it.
Alright, the way this will work, we're going to listen to the 1AC. Sharon's going to deliver the 1AC. We're going to hear a cross-examination. Colin will be delivering a cross-examination. Then we'll pause for a moment to talk. Then we'll hear the 1NC. And in these early parts of the day, we're not going to interrupt too much because we're under a little bit of time pressure. As you're listening to the 1AC, I want you to think about how Sharon delivers the 1AC, what connections she's making. Is she emphasizing certain words or phrases, warrants, and the evidence? Is it easy to flow? And just start to kind of think about how easy it is to judge, as a judge, how easy it is to flow the 1AC. And then when Colin cross-examines, think about, all right, well, what is Colin maybe trying to do here? What negative strategy do I envision the negative team introducing based on this cross-examination? How is the cross-ex? How's it going? How does it go for the negative? How does it go for the affirmative? So be thinking about that, but certainly be flowing along. So without further ado, from the great University of Iowa, Sharon Kann.
All right, everybody good? Advantage 1 is oil spills. Cuba drilling is inevitable. The embargo is only boxed out. U.S. experts will guess 12. Energy port Cuba also has its first one. Has ever been the danger of an accident. Cuba produced oil without many U.S. industry experts on safety. The embargo has left Cubans with insufficient resources and inexperience with high-tech that lessens the chance of a response that's crucial to containing damage to the deep water horizon field. Cuba is determined to continue exploring shallow water holds less promise that Cuba will give up trying. And Russian drilling is coming. We post date tomorrow 13. A Russian oil state company could literally have North Cuba's North Shore starts to temporarily halting exploration will resume its exploration next year. The Russians are considering likely to meet their promise next year because Putin's government has been pushing hard to warm up political and commercial ties with the one-time ally Havana supporters of improving U.S. relations with Cuba, arguing that Washington should allow American oil firms to get a piece of the potential profits. An embargo fails and stops proactive spill response. Helmet 11. Repsol will start drilling for oil and will be joined by rigs from Venezuela for Vietnam, Malaysia, and Venezuela. But you won't see the U.S. maintains its embargo. This represents a dangerous threat. The U.S. embargo do nothing to prevent drilling, but also prevent the work from being done by the most experienced companies, the highest quality equipment. Although the best service companies and parts manufactured here in the U.S. Gulf Coast, Repsol will have to train people and scrounge for spare parts around the rest of the world. And the U.S. is key proactive steps. Spills are inevitable. Stat 12. The U.S. embargo to Cuba is getting away. Safety sanctions not only threaten Florida's economy, that of Cuba, the worst case scenario C, sponsor case of disaster check, helmet preparation efforts, and F grade. We're getting ready for what inevitably happens. Don't take the right proactive steps. Should there be any for response, the U.S. has not interpreted sanctions policy in a way that allow to make available technologies required and independently. Hurricanes cause spills. Quick reactions are also needed. Stevens 11. The BP disaster has need for timely response to the blowout occurred in Cuban water. The embargo would not allow U.S. firms to drill relief of spills are more likely because of hurricane activity, which says for U.S. firms permitted relief take 24 hours, barring their participation, 30 to 50 days to help to arrive from Southeast Asia. The Treasury Department has authorized the issue license, and on emergency basis, the BP still shows that early critical response will be needed to try to make slower time to procure the license. The Obama administration argues that some firms are pre-cleared to respond, or experts say the current schemes make it impossible to pre-clear the correct technology, and U.S. experts are key to boost reaction time. Sakari 11. That's a global scrabble for there's a global scrabble for Spain, Norway, Egypt, Brazil, Venezuela, Malaysia, and Vietnam are all swooping in the rigs off Cuba. Go even deeper in the deep water horizon. What happens if there's another spill? Will be easy to clean up. No, you'll see the nearest and best experts are all American beer food and by loss being involved in any way with Cuba, and spills spread and kills ecosystems. That's key to regional biodiversity. Alameda 12. The Cuba's access to containment system spill response is severely restricted by U.S. embargo, yet disaster occurs not only with Cuban ecosystems be severely damaged with those of the U.S. and East Coast, and considering Cuban waters become the highest concentration of biodiversity in the region, it's spawning ground for fish of Cuban oils will conflict unprecedented environmental devastation of biodiversity and specific hotspot check distinction key to ag medicine and ecosystems. Mittermeier 11. Human activities elevate the rate of species extinct to 1,000 more times than natural rate of species vanish. So too does the health of every human species made to harbor cure for the next path into the loss of species. We lose our agricultural resilience and the ecosystem support life on Earth. Thus, cancel the moral cost inflicted by species extinction to Earth. Climate change species only increase their importance. Extinction is global phenomenon with impacts far beyond borders. The question resolves around the vulnerability and irreplaceability in Cuba, or Caribbean is one such hotspot. CFPF 10. The Caribbean islands classified as one of the global biodiversity hotspots by virtue of the high investment of the Caribbean islands, exceptionally important for global biodiversity. The hotspot includes more ecosystem from the montane cloud forest to the coral reefs, and independently other spills will crush the U.S. economy. National Commission 11. Inaction runs the risk of total damage to the regional economy and tens of billions of dollars of avoidable cleanup costs. With another disaster happens, the entire offshore energy enterprise is threatened with the nation's economy, and avoiding U.S. economic decline is key to the global economy. BW 13. North America is heading towards recovery through continued weakness in Asia and Europe. The U.S. will have to serve as a critical engine to improve global economic ability, and a global economic decline causes nuclear war. Alpha 9. Global chaos caused by economic conflicts in Spain is run down to propose to raise threats to China's stability through rapid recession to repression inside Russia, along with the threatening posture to neighbors likely to global collapse of joint active tension coupled with this peace and all the region may result in the small explosion to coalesce into the Big Bang. Advantage to U.S. relations. The scenario 1 is China. U.S.-Cuban oil co-op U.S.-Chinese research wars. Benjamin Alvarado 10. Those involved in security interests of the U.S. need to understand the implication of energy and cooperation with the U.S. and Cuba. This includes the assessment of the growing influence of China in the region. Energy resources keeping them a buffer disruptions against disruptions. U.S. production because the U.S. to try energy security become essential to the U.S. promote to insert the activities and national oil companies' special development to keep the objective transformation of Cuba into a stable NOC that exhibits a high technical competency in the light of the national future cooperation depends largely on the common energy policy interests. The NOC's the United States China growing presence in Latin America is being interpreted as a sign of intensifying competition over energy resources. The competition could easily be the cause of international conflict, and U.S. signed a war against nuclear law. 13. Although Beijing and Washington crisis mechanisms of communication remain and draw on deep reservoirs of suspicion, it's unclear whether each side understands what types of action result in nuclear responses. Neither side seem to believe the other's escalation management could be especially difficult. Both sides possessing nuclear weapons as such a conflict would be devastating, and resource wars independently escalate, cause extinction. Lemon 7. With the world's energy supplies finite and the U.S. heavily dependent on imports, peak oil approaching security for American meats as assuring a sustainable supply. This takes greater than ever U.S. and challenging China with stake is more than oil supply planet. Survival Earth, please also survival on life resource worth meets the point of no return. There may be nothing left than the threat is real. What's nearly happened to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the plan sufficiently hedges energy security. Benjamin Alvarado 10. The success of the U.S. energy resource will have to enhance the energy security of the U.S. and broader geostrategic imperatives in Cuba could potentially spark American energy need by serving as a hedge against slow hedge disruptive petroleum products. And scenario 2 is Latin America. The plan is key to checking current tensions. Benjamin Alvarado 10. Deepening collaborative modalities with other regional partners enhanced by pursuing regional cooperation with Cuba. Cuba's increasing leadership role in the region may be used the U.S. to promote beneficial efforts, and also to create a Cuban-American partnership by service of conflict building escalating these events to give the regional partners by American domination. The basic effective partnership with Cuba in the Latin American shape by the common interest Cuba's long been a stumbling block for you as relation to other countries in the hemisphere. Report identified initiative about energy directly fulfilled by the objective in order to specifically promote trust and confidence. Now is key. We're on the brink. Shifter 12. If the U.S. and Latin America do not make an effort to change the chance-based war, the most likely scenario will be the continued drift of spade and missed opportunities. The U.S. and Latin America would get to several ways and forego the opportunities or urgent problems arise that require effective collaboration with their chance potential use in Latin America become worse and adversely affecting everyone's interest in Cuba is key that spills over. Shifter 12. Cuba should pose a significant challenge for the relationship with the United States and Latin America. Although the United States has moved to relax restricting travel to Cuba, Washington needs to dismantle its restraints on relations with Cuba. Cuba is one of the residual issues that are most obstructive use effective use of Latin American engagement and a policy to isolate Cuba is important first step. Many issues in the hemisphere generally are critical. Global dimension of Latin American relations are assuming enhanced roles in global security issues. Cuba Latin American cooperation also be increasing important. Latin America has the opportunity to participate actively in non-proliferation of the main proliferation challenges they are found in the transfer of nuclear material to terrorists in the context of such south to south connecting to critical many countries that we priority climate change council the national voice in international debates on topics of the boards of Amazon, based on the worldwide climate change, Brazil and 5 other South American countries, special role to play the United States and Latin America on odds on drug policy, mutual interest, them collaborating more effective approach to nuke terror escalation 10. The act of nuclear terrorism precipitate chain events leading to a massive change in nuclear weapons. We want to say highly might react to you as the material to come from the Russia's top had leaders would assume the Washington's responsibility to raise the possibility of nuclear confrontation. Russia and China, the U.S. might find a place in nuclear arms higher than Washington. China might mistakenly read the society view as intention to use force in situation have changed to preempt my further information might be reversed to Russia and China to nuclear terrorism. How Russia review such a possibility likely change. Armies will also respond to attack. Country respond to the pressure. Other power not in the country might help the chase of nuclear retaliation with reducing such a prosperous future. International cooperation, the collaboration of fisting industrial holding the terrorists can attain nuclear weapons. NTA 10. These do not underestimate terrorist groups that have consequences for deadly. Have the right to technically ready to help in the finances of groups with highly enriched uranium because you transport and smuggle because materials might be easily obtained. Warming is real and cause extinction. EDF 9. There's no debate among scientists with respect to time to body state the warming Ukraine people are causing the best way to get temperature, water vapor levels to reduce CO2 emission. Beneficial effects will be far away the damage disruption. Scientists not think that CO2 fertilization affecting crops and overstating warning is not natural. Scientists show the activities are pumping far more CO2 in the atmosphere than ever, releasing hundreds of thousands of years. The buildup of CO2 is the biggest cause of global warming unless we limit the gas and we power and warming trends. The unseen since human civilization began, the consequences are likely to be dire scarcity, food and water lead to major conflicts, broad ripple effect because even if people find a way to adapt the wildlife and plants we depend on, maybe be able to adapt to rapid climate change in the world as we know it may disappear. Plan. The United States federal, as they pertain to crude oil reservoirs, the United States federal government should lift its restrictions that precluding firms from exploring, extracting, refining, importing, or coordinating engineering and safety protocols for the Republic of Cuba. Contention 3 is solvency. First, the plan is effective, topical, and U.S. firms will say yes. Benjamin Alvarado 10. There are areas in the energy sector with U.S. and Cuban cooperation, exploration, production, downstream operation, the auxiliary service opportunities firms to invest directly in the development of Cuban energy research and created. There has been a lack of interest on the part of American international oil firms developing Cuban market. There are numerous opportunities for American firms as soon as there are significant changes in the Cuban embargoes that this type of engagement can occur. And Cuba will also say yes. That spills over. Benjamin Alvarado 10. The opportunity to advance relations to energy really appears to be right. The Cuban energy authorities made it clear that their preferred energy development scenarios includes working close with U.S. oil industry and technology. Should the U.S. lift policy, it may pave the way to establishing much needed conflicts across the communities. And the plan establishes a long-term framework for normalizing relations. Lanyard 13. Due to the disagreement over the discretion U.S. policy takes, unlike the U.S. policy towards Cuba will change overnight, leverage less, making small changes that are in the best interest of the U.S. and Cuba, but also losing restrictions of the ability of companies provided since Cuba's offshore drilling efforts can provide a long-term framework for the normalization of relations on mutually acceptable terms. Also is that Cuba and U.S. oil companies will both say yes. Reuters 10. Due to the embargo, U.S. oil companies are not allowed to operate in Cuba despite 5 decades of hostile relations. Cuba said it will welcome the involvement of the United States companies in developing offshore fields. U.S. oil service companies would like to enter the Cuban market because it's a market close to home.
Okay, there seems to be a little bit of a tension between reading a warming advantage and also claiming that you lead to a lot more oil being produced. So my first question is, how conducive can a relationship between the U.S. and Cuba built on oil production be towards solving global climate change?
I think there are two things. First is I disagree that there's a tension necessarily because we agree, or we think that sort of greener methods of drilling in more safe ways would decrease the effect on the climate. The second one is a piece of Benjamin Alvarado evidence indicates it's key to like getting global coalitions on people on board. And
okay, well, let's address the second portion of your answer first. Sure. What do the global coalitions do? Are we talking regulations on emissions? Are we talking alternative energy?
Yeah,
what are we talking about?
Our evidence doesn't indicate what the coalitions do. What it does say is that in order to jumpstart sort of action towards doing anything that is forestalled, it's a question of getting the 5 South American players to step up.
Okay, but when we do whatever the process of those negotiations are, which is increasing investment in alternative energy, increasing the amount of carbon emission regulations, why would Cuba necessarily think that we are that great of a partner anymore when we're eliminating the foundation for the relationship with them?
I don't think they necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. I think that there are methods of greener oil drilling, things like putting solar power on oil wells, which I'm sure you remember from last year's topic. There are ways to do it together.
Okay.
I don't think it necessarily trades off.
Given the fact that Cuba is an island nation, they may have some incentive to prevent massive sea level rises in addition to preserving their economy.
They probably would like that.
Exxon Valdez, Deepwater Horizon,
Yeah.
whole bunch of other oil spills happen in history. Why is this one different from everyone in the half-pass?
Our evidence indicates that they're about to drill deeper in the instance of sort of the Cuba rigs, which is different. The second indication is that it's the context of the compounding interest of these things. So, like, they've all happened, and we sort of hit a point now where another one, unable to be cleaned up.
Which card do you think supports that second argument?
I don't. It says that it's a question of sort of time frame, and I think it's one of the Benjamin Alvarado evidence.
Okay. Why? I think the only card that I read in my reading of your 1AC that says that the U.S. technology is key or is safer is Zakaria. What is the warrant?
Zakaria says that it's the U.S. ability to do things. Well, I disagree. I think Leguess also makes a claim about the safety of experts.
And Stevens 11 and the second Volstead 12.
Yeah,
What
and I
is
think
the
in terms
general
of
warrant?
Yeah, it's just that U.S. tech is much better done. They're better trained. In answer to your Zakaria question, he indicates it's relief well drilling that the U.S. is uniquely enabled to do best.
Okay. In the ununderlined portion of your Bolstad card, it cites an former EPA chief, Riley, who says, quote,
Sure.
"Nobody is predicting a catastrophe in association with anything the Cubans are overseeing. In every way, the Cuban approach to this is responsible, careful, and attentive to the risk that they are undertaking."
Yeah, but that's
Why
just
should we assume that there's going to be an oil spill?
Sure, that's
this
the
is from
issue.
this is from someone
Right.
who used to work at the
The
EPA.
EPA report that he's citing, or at least that he's talking about, is talking about status quo Cuba efforts because they haven't actually drilled anything. The way they're going about it is responsible because they're doing studies and they're measuring, but we don't know, A, that those are
Why?
accurate, and B, that when they actually drill,
that
they're good.
report also
Why would
doesn't
we
speak
assume
to
that they
any
would
of the other
break away
international
from
actors
being
getting
safe?
involved in Cuban drilling?
Yeah. International actors as well.
All right, so think about what you think that cross-examination reveals about where the negative might be going. What do those questions get at? Do you think that's going to end up in the speeches? Why did Colin choose to cross-examine about the issues that he chose to cross-examine about? Obviously, there's a lot of different things he could have asked questions about. He honed in on a couple of specific things. Think to
gotta talk to his
yourself,
mom.
why did he do that? Why did he make those choices? And what does that tell me about what I think the negative strategy is going to be? We're going to listen to the 1NC here in a minute. As you're listening to the 1NC, think about what the 2NR options are. So you're going to hear a bunch of off-case arguments, you're going to hear a bunch of case arguments. As you're listening to that, think about, all right, how could Colin eventually package some of these arguments together into a 2NR? What are those 2NRs? And then when Sharon cross-examines Margaret, think, all right, well, what did this cross-examine reveal about what the affirmative might be thinking? Which of those negative strategies is the affirmative most concerned about? Which of the negative strategies is the affirmative choosing to invest in cross-sex time?
That's awesome. Thank you. I was looking under the. I just got it. One sec.
All right, Margaret, what do you got for us?
Okay. Feeling 4 off. 5 off. 5 off. Then solvency, spills, relations.
5 off.
I need one more people.
Solvency, oil spills, relations.
Hold up, I need one more sheet. Despite all those warnings. Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
We said 9.
I just didn't listen. I was looking at cute cats and Facebook. You're the worst. I mean, it's true. That was what I was doing.
All right, get your clothes together. Simmer down.
It's true. Before the debate, that was what I was doing.
If it takes you more than a couple seconds to get those clothes together, you got to do a better job of labeling them so you can tell which one is which.
I didn't say anything bad. It's true.
I don't think there's any.
Never been more upset in my life. Okay.
All right, we ready?
CIR will pass, but its close August recess is key. Kenny in 722, the House will pass immigration legislation. Proponents work to counter opponents of the Republicans on the way towards the Republican Party, and no labels. Democrats have delivered a major and campaign promises. Supporters of immigration reform are on the path to victory. Plan drains political capital. Zero support in Congress. Guggenheim and 11. It's taken years for the Senate bill to hold a hearing in Senator West's support. Not a single dialogue with Cuba, despite testimony from legislative representatives. Republican senators to exploit the opportunity to call for opening more areas of domestic waters to offshore drilling. Political capital is key to holistic passage. Multiple warrants by Martin in 713. Supporters of CIR welcome the boost. We need to display step by step. They believe that the Obama is preparing to carry out to the momentum on use the ability public support. Obama use the power to highlight the need for reform before and increasing green cards generates effective base of I have IT experts, soft cybersecurity, McElhinny in 9 top 10 Forbes H1B requesters are full of overseas. We're seeing a lot of security around cybersecurity recently. Things about to get done generating more effective group IT experts in the United States. Many are coming to the U.S. institution overseas, returning back to as much as disadvantaged intelligence students have tremendous development in technology, scientific advances like the green card handing them within what's going on in federal security needs. Cyber terrorism will cause accidental launch of triggers the death hand and nuclear war fits at 9. Depending on views on electronic back to the Navy system for broadcasting nuclear launchers, terrorists, cyber terrorists, going to infiltrate the assert or false orders for launch and ultra led many insertions, malicious code detection of the code be initiated engagement with all attempts to cyber terrorists to create illusion to happy life strike them engage failed deadly systems to the hand launch a mass kill nuclear attack in the event of decapitation strike the lack pressure decision making process made it appears the EMP burst of terrorist groups also launch 9 nuclear missile foot systems to counter the dual phenomenology nuclear war does now topicality appeasement engagement requires engagement economic context the affirmative point of appeasement this blurs the practice between any positive sanction voting issue for limits and research and investigate. In 1, I propose we define engagement as temporal influence political behavior through the comprehensive establishment enhance the context economic context trade agreements for example and humanitarian aid of the attempt to reduce tension by 2 states by removal of principal causes is in a way concedes of foreign policy terms and while making it clear the precise means involved when making a conflict between 2 states remove a number of ways. Next off is shunning the affirmative engagement with known human rights abuse and moral duty to shun them. Boveras in 89 this more involved respecting rights and not violating them. One has a duty not to avoid the violating human rights in action, but also by support that moral or distinction in moral behavior to previously mutually enforced 2000 moral behavior there is in order to discriminate the much more violation of people's human rights, violation of human rights undetermined the moral order the tolerated society will the right refuse to have to do so to person not to support from the moral order this section reinforces the moral order shunning moral effects of shun person even if the right impact not adequate to call moral behavior with an obligation to shun to do so may interpret as tacit complicity with willful persistent and fragrant immorality. China counterplan. The People's Republic of China should increase investment and cooperation with the Republic of Cuba for exploiting, extracting, refining, importing, coordinating, engineering, and safety protocols for crude oil production. It solves. China is a better alternative than the United States. Ellison 6. China represents a real alternative for market primary project exports, alternative resources, investment capital. China's willingness to invest in it as another way to obtain resources and technical expertise. Next, the net benefit Chinese soft power. The counterplan is critical to what Weiss in 11 across Latin America. There is a right no successful Emily China, which turn has given China golden opportunity to extend cultural soft power. China needs a convincing narrative. China provides a gold model Latin American countries way to do China's number one trading partner to recapture China's now unique position to invest in capital intensive project funding China Latin American narrative responsibilities in a way the right story will be crucial for soft power exceeding China's critical soft power is key to the economy. CS in 2009 aware of the benefits of soft power China literally aimed at relationships. Well, China relationships largely economic friendships and policy and emphasizing sovereignty and non-interference with the objective of secure and stable and sustainable access to resources new exports to the economy. Decline causes World War III to play in 2003. China disintegrated because the economy not engaged into cancel massive flood of refugees. Japan might look to annex a slice of China's India might grab for Japan and Pakistan for Castro. Say hello to World War III. Oil disad Russia's economy is moving right now. High oil prices are a critical factor. Lucina in 717, according to the World Bank, Russia's economy jumped ahead of the European nations to become the fifth largest worldwide GDP. The success of Russia's economy is not. So price exports, Russian economy generating growth through favorable prices prime to Europe is necessary. For stocks are exciting and Russians are not clear. Lifting the embargo causes oil increased output. In 11, Congress should relax the embargo to communists and also the United States companies practicing Cuban production makes no sense of the war. Government efforts to increase oil output fast as little as 3 years. A surge in oil production devastates Russia's economy. Duffy in 13, Russia's always been dependent on oil products. In fact, the collapse of the rights of the 80s. The 80s had led to the book. The USSR's back the Polish price oil crash to collapse the economy. In Soviet Union, you've got a whole leader in oil production. The necessity of oil price and all come to price collapse caused by surge of world oil production. Weakened Russian economy causes nuclear war. Peace in 6. Scientists believe time to sell the nuclear knowledge to organizations with nuclear ambition. The consequences of check the nuclear knowledge are truly horrifying. To attack with nuclear weapon to be devastated there would be pressure in the United States to cover to retaliate with nuclear weapons to trigger the full-scale nuclear conflict legal to nuclear weapons. Russia will trigger the widespread proliferation of nuclear nations. This will increase attacks on the U.S. as well as increase the likelihood that regional conflicts will join the United States and escalate to nuclear weapons. Now, solvency. The Cuba will say no. They're skeptical of U.S. and won the embargo out of self-interest. This is French. And 13, the Cuban government spending on to reduce tension with the United States and are desperate for the big father and relationships right out of the alternative. There's a hefty skepticism and pride in the Cuban side. To their evidence cites other companies drilling in Cuba. They have no evidence that the U.S. lifted the embargo that companies would get contracts with Cuba. This takes out solvency for the oil advantage and for the China resource war scenario. Oil advantage, no Cuban drilling now. O'Grady in 13, that is Brazil had given up on drilling the Cuban Repsol gave up in 2012. Malaysia came out of Venezuela had no luck at the carbon. Announced that the brigade had Malaysia last week came to the end of shallow water drilling now. The two is U.S. experts on key. Either look at evidence as environmental defense fund scientists like Cuba that exhibited world-class and science leader skills in oil production plus be disappointed. Zero Hellman evidence says that other international companies are drilling in Cuba with sufficient safety equipment now. That's Norway is a proven operator. See some points there both evidence to cites EPA officials that have been reassured by the safety protocols of companies drilling in Cuba. Former U.S. Chief Riley said that no one's predicting a catastrophe, and also he said that the Cuban approach is responsible, careful, and attentive to the risk. 3 is oil spills impacts are empirically did not deepwater horizon. Exxon policies every other oil spill in history. 4 is marine ecosystem servers in Kennedy 2002 marine ecosystem servers and biological components they coupled with divine speculative responsibility to and change regularly ecological adaptable some speed also genetic variability through the range many for adapting B is especially in oil spill Schwenson in China with all with contaminated water of the Gulf region of the 8,000 million but again the same concentration existing swimming pool U.S. definitely spending there with the never designed to the power of the ecosystems or the checking the change will be extraordinary the natural resources become the prevailing knowledge of 5 is coastal economies are not key to the overall U.S. economy. It's resilient. Tourism fishing is one of the state would not take down the whole economy. 6 is the economy is resilient. EU in 11 the EIU in 11 I mean U.S. economy resilient in the face of traction GDP expanded headline the consumer spending increasing given the economy dropped the business the grew and but there was just by Washington everything the volatility U.S. economy is not in danger of a recession. Relations advantage. 1. Cuba isn't key to U.S. energy demands. Venezuela, Mexico, domestic production sells their Benjamin Alvarado evidence says that Cuba could enhance U.S. energy security through refining, marketing, and storage of oil, not more drilling. Status quo self 2 is disadvantage. Also assumes that we're running out of oil and that this will cause a conflict with China. There's no time frame or bring further impact. There is resource theory is wrong. For 2008, resource wars are increasing where a resource plays a role. The rights of the budget they're expensive and they rarely work. So almost resources order $100 billion request for Kuwait's 1.5 million barrels of bulging if sovereign wealth or discovered it's easier to give resources to the stock exchange rather than the gun barrels. 4 is oil cooperatives won't spill over to broader relations. Paget in told the wishful thinking. Also sold the notion that U.S.-Cuban cooperation, Julian duplicated other parts among them, or the embargo which Washington keeps in place. 5 is Plan itself, Cuban relations, human rights, Guantanamo, Cuban Americans, blacks, Heinstein and Lee. In 13, issues preventing normalization of U.S.-Cuban relations and human rights violation, Cuban government severity of 5 citizens on the installation, United States overthrow the state Guantanamo Bay. Yesterday, that Cuban officials said the prison camp is simple, solidarity with the world, and to the United States Cuban exile community, Cuban American community, for traditionally influenced U.S. political parties to be on the alienation of the 6 is Cuban not like key to Latin American relations. Key in 2000, Cuban is not an important issue. Latin American relations, while publicly in Latin American countries opposing Margaret popularity, they're extremely conservative. The capital of Verda investments on their countries' islands. And the 7 is there's no impact. Latin America has no states with nuclear weapons. There's terrorists can't get to them. 8 is no impact to terrorism. Check barriers. Chapman until like a terrorist group happened in atomic bomb scenes substantially least while the events were had to compromise Herculean task force to terrorists has to get the facial material that the having gone missing and those generally accounts of taxability about that to be generally how tools engage in requires a specialized skill that have to deliver on American soldiers and now expanded circle of people who's going on and can't tell them what the blood screw up given this odds it seems probable that if they probably won't bother. 9 is the plan massively increases U.S. oil consumption arena warming advantage obviously makes no zero sense. 10 is species can adapt especially in tropical hotspots wisely in sciences and 2012 ecological studies evolutionary responses climate change forecasts that these are not vulnerable to extinction if you adapt to rates and temperature but environment change organisms move away adapting physiology species get into higher temperature evolve quicker evolutionary changes as compensate to species need to average temperature ranges of all 2 versus extinction is low. 7-11 is improved U.S. Cuban relations built solely on cooperation over oil production are inevitably unsustainable. The affirmative claims it says to solve the warming advantages of cooperation over emissions regulation and alternative energy but undermine the need for oil.
We doing cross section.
Okay. First question. The link card to the politics dissed, the Guggenheim evidence. Can everyone hear? Okay. The link evidence, the ununderlined portion, it says that the Congress has taken a long time to hold the hearing about Cuba oil. And it says that, in the ununderlined portion, that hearing was also focused on offshore oil drilling in Canada, Russia, and the Bahamas. Why do they uniquely care about offshore production?
Yeah, you're right. Well, the ununderlined parts of the card talk about other places.
Sure.
The underlined parts of the card say that people are
Yeah, but
largely
it's
against
also-
Cuban oil drilling. You're
Okay,
right.
can I ask a different
drilling
question about
in
that?
Canada, also unpopular.
Can I ask a different question about that? The further down in the evidence, it says that, they're mad about Cuba. An underlying portion again says, but earlier this year, Obama recognized that it was necessary to work with our neighbors in the Gulf and Cuba. It seems like there's been some shift. Why is that still the stance of
That merely
Congress?
proves that there would be fights in Congress. Members of Congress disagree with
It says
Obama.
they recognize they need to do so.
No, it says that Obama recognized the need to do so, not
So
that
it's not
Congress
about what
does.
Obama. Okay,
Well,
next
no,
question.
that proves that it
The
would drain
Ellis
political
evidence.
capital because he would get the blame.
Ellis evidence on China. It says that China's a better alternative. The section after you stop reading says that Chinese engagement with Bolivia thus gives them more latitude to proceed. Why does this mean that they're able to better engage with Cuba than the United States?
You're right. Their evidence is talking empirically about China's engagement with other countries.
Sure.
Bolivia is a
But if
prime
your evidence
example.
also concedes that Cuba's unique situation because of the short nature of isolation, does that mean that
Where does our
situation also
evidence
apply?
say that?
The soft power evidence also says that it's about tailoring it to each situation, and that's what makes Chinese
You're
soft
right, and
power
our
so
soft power
chill.
evidence indicates that China has the ability to do that.
Right,
We've
it
read
says they
evidence.
have to. Why does being able to do it in one situation means they can just put that template onto
Our
another
Weist
one?
evidence also indicates that China has the capability and has
they
been
just can't
engaging.
do it.
You know,
Okay.
they are actually
The
in Latin America already.
Second
That's what
question
your
I have
advantage is about.
is why is China being able to do stuff in terms of Cuba, able to solve sort of U.S. Latin American relations vis-a-vis corporations cooperating with each other? Or
I'm sorry,
companies?
can you repeat that question?
Yeah. I understand that maybe China has a soft power influence. Why is that able to sort of resolve the precarious relationship between the United States and different sort of Cuban and Latin American allies?
We would think that the reason that that's not a net benefit.
Okay. The Russia evidence.
We don't claim it solves the second
It does
That's
not
fine.
solve
Okay, I
relations.
just want to make sure. The Russia advantage, your econ collapse internal link, the Duffy evidence, is from a staff writer, and she just says that Russia has empirically been dependent and cites a guy from the Journal of American History. Why is this indicative of the current
Well, first
status
of all,
of the Russian
Journal of
economy?
American History sounds pretty qualified
Right,
to me.
about empirics,
Second of all,
but
she
why
also
is it true of
cites
the
a
current
lot
state?
of really reasonable empirics. For example, what caused the collapse of the USSR?
I'm asking why is it
Probably oil.
current if it relies on empirics?
But she's also citing current reform trends.
Okay, what are those reform trends in terms of Russia's economy?
Reform trends, well, currently Europe not as dependent on
Right,
oil,
so
and
Europe's
their
not
economy
dependent. What else?
You got to let me finish.
Right,
And their
I get that they're
economy
dependent.
is faltering right now. They don't really have any other sectors other than
Okay, so it's-
vodka to back them up.
That's probably true. The last question I have is your T evidence. You say that it's a one-off appeasement strategy. We read two pieces of evidence about creating a long-term framework for engagement. Is this the same type of appeasement that your evidence
Well, I
assumes?
think that right now you're mixing burdens, reading an advantage that says in the
Right, I'm
future
just
we
asking
do
if
more
it
is not.
creates a
The
framework.
plan is
Okay,
a
it's a
one-shot
one-time.
thing.
All right, we'll give VM a moment to prepare for the 2ACs. How many off-case arguments did Margaret introduce? 5. How many case arguments did Margaret Margaret.
Yeah.
See if you can figure that out. It shouldn't be that difficult. You should use numbering when we talk about this.
Did I continue
Count
this
it
number,
up
by the way?
and
I thought I did on the second advantage. The first advantage I was probably shaking.
alright, count it up quietly in your own head.
I'm not one to support it.
That's a really good sign.
Settle down. Who's got a number of case arguments that they think? What do you think? 19. That's accurate. There are 19 arguments on the case. There's one that there is a subpoint, or there are two where there's subpoint. There were 19 on-case arguments. There were 5 off-case arguments. What do you get if you multiply those two numbers together? 95. So the 1 and C's product was 95. That's a very good product. So when you're designing your 1 and C, you want to have a good amount of arguments. You want to have a lot of case arguments. You want some off-case arguments. This 1 and C has a lot of arguments in it, and in particular, it has a lot of arguments on the case. And those arguments against the case are really valuable. So a 1 and C product of 95, very good. What do we notice about some of the off-case arguments that were introduced? What do we notice about them? What jumps out at you about some of the off-case arguments? Are each of the off-case arguments created equally? No. What explain. Somebody raise their hand and explain to us. Please. Yeah. Okay, so I think there are 2 off-case arguments that are very briefly introduced. What are the 2 off-case arguments that were very briefly introduced? Harry. Yeah, topicality and shunning. So topicality is just a card, and there's like kind of a standard argument in the tag of the card. Shunning is just a single card. What does that tell you about those 2 off-case positions? If you were Liam, what would you be thinking? What would you be thinking? They're probably not going to go for it? Okay, what would you think? Is that what you would have thought?
Because they're undercovering it to go for it like really, really in-depth in the 2 and the 2 and C, or they're just...
So either they're going to kick it, and so they didn't want to spend a lot of 1 and C time, or they're kind of sandbagging a little bit, and they're trying to be like, all right, Liam, let's see what you got here. Let's see, are you going to undercover this too? And then, it'll be a big part of the negative block. What does Liam have to do? Who does he have to trust? Not himself. I mean, he should trust himself in general, but he's got to trust Sharon, right? So that if the negative block develops one of those arguments into a big part of the negative block, he's got to trust that Sharon's there for him, and Sharon's going to answer those arguments in the 1AR. 2 things that are good. So Margaret titled all of the off-case positions except, I think, the first one. So it would have been good if she had titled the first one. But she titled all the rest of the off-case arguments, I think. And then she did something awesome on the case, which is that she explicitly hard-numbered her case arguments. Who found that much easier to flow than if she had just said next like 19 times or 18 times? Yeah? Isn't that cool? That allowed Margaret to go faster. It made sure that when Margaret or Colin in the negative block is extending these case arguments, it makes it much cleaner. It makes it much easier for them to refer back to the 1 and C arguments about the case. Think about the cross-sects. What did she jump on? Why did she choose the cross-sex threads that she did? What were you thinking?
I think she was trying to go for more of like case arguments, trying to get rid of, like, point out flaws in evidence.
Yeah, both of the first 2 cross-examinations have been very heavily about the case. It seems like the case is going to be a big deal in this debate, regardless of what the 2NR goes for. They're setting up a lot of different strategies. How many negative strategies, how many 2NR options, so if we count the case as like a unified thing, so you don't have to count like each advantage. How many 2NR options has the negative given themselves? Well, let's go through them. So they can go for topicality, right? They can go for politics in the case. They can go for shunning in the case. They can go for the Russian oil DA in the case. They can go for the China counterplan and the China counterplan's net benefit, internal net benefit, and they can probably go for the China counterplan and the politics dissent. So how many is that? I lost count because I was doing it on my hand, stupidly. Is it 6? I think it's 6 or 7 even. That's a lot of options. So Liam's got to figure out, all right, which of those is the most threatening? Which of those is most challenging? Which arguments play into the most possible 2NRs? So I want you to think for a moment before he reveals his roadmap. how you, if you were the second affirmative and you were about to give this speech that Liam's going to give, how would you roadmap your 2AC? What order would you put the arguments in? Which strategies do you think are most threatening? So which off-case positions are you going to put up higher in your order? And which off-case positions do you think aren't as threatening, and so you're going to put them lower in your order? Think about what you would do. Everybody put your papers, your flows, together in the order that you would give the 2AC if you were given the speech Liam's about to give. We'll give you a second. And then we'll have Liam reveal what he decided to do. And we'll see if you and Liam are on the same page here or if you disagree.
Do you want this timer?
Don't worry about what the person next to you is doing. It's your decision.
Okay.
There's no definitely right answer here.
Wow.
But you should be thinking about, all
How
right,
do I-
which of these arguments is most threatening? Which of them is least threatening? What ones do I have to put up high in my order and make sure I spend a lot of time there? Which ones am I less concerned if I don't have a ton of time to answer them? The roadmap in the 2AC is really important. If you got a bad roadmap, you're setting yourself up to fail. Their order? All right, everyone be very quiet and don't right or you get wrong or you agree or disagree. But Liam, tell us what your roadmap is for your 2AC.
Spills, solvency, relations, T, China counterplan, shunning, Russian oil, politics.
Just because this is data on here, were there any other changes you made other than
Like I said, there's no right answer. That's just based on Liam's assessment of which argument he finds most threatening. And which strategy he envisions Colin settling on in the 2NR. So get your flows in order. We're going to listen to the 2AC, then we're going to hear Margaret cross-examine Liam. Then we're going to talk about how Colin and Margaret are going to set up the negative blocks. We'll give them a little bit of time to set up the negative blocks and prepare for the 2AC, and we'll have a little bit of a conversation about that. So lock in for the 2AC and then cross-examination of that 2AC.
All right, anybody not ready? Yes, drilling now. 3 reasons. First is Cuba so energy poor they are forced to keep trying. That's the guess evidence. Second is Russia literally has plans to start drilling process next year. That is the time frame for our impacts. The evidence from 2013 and post-states there. Third is global interest. The Zachari evidence cites 9 countries with intentions to take advantage of Cuban oil. They have to disprove all of them. And U.S. involvement in the spill is necessarily key. First is expertise. Best engineers and BP spill actors know the best containment technique. Second is proximity. We take 1 day. The rest of the world takes 50. Third is technology. Best manufacturers and parts are based here. Embargo blocks their use. Fourth is proactive key. Only way to send the right tech engineers is to plan ahead. BP proves. Fifth is even if drilling tech is sufficient, like they prove our evidence cites spills are inevitable into cleaner technology that other countries will fail at. Now, BP cannot disprove. First, it did not occur in a hotspot, and second, as our economy internally assumes the next spill post-BP. Now, marine ecosystems are not resilient specifically, and oil spill that can kill species fast enough before they can adapt. Their oil card is written by a moron who talks about humans in a swimming pool full of oil. Doesn't apply. Now, there is an economy internally. Coastal economics may not matter, but it's about the oil industry collapsing because of public backlash. Now, the economy overall is not resilient. First is that the evidence just only cites growth. However, oil is key to the overall economy. If that industry collapses, the 70s proves that will cause an impact. That causes extinction escalates globally, draws in China, meets their impacts inevitable solvency. Cuba will say yes. First is economic incentive. They want the investment from the U.S. companies. Second is Cuba's statements prove authorities have publicly said that they will welcome our energy cooperation. Third is long-term framework plan results in talks that can overcome other issues like the rest of the embargo and human rights issues. Fourth is prefer specificity. Only our evidence speaks to Cuba's views of oil cooperation specifically. Now, we don't need to win contracts. It's just a question of whether we move the embargo so we can import oil, even if it's drilled by Russia. If it's drilled in Cuban waters, we can import additionally, or evidence indicates that Cuba does want the U.S. to get involved. Relations. Cuba may not be key to our oil reserves, but that argument just proves we don't link to the Russia dissent. It's just a question of whether we have access to a secondary reserve of things like Middle Eastern oil suddenly cut off access. We don't have to fall for that supply disruption. We can get it from Latin America. We don't increase oil used by the United States. We just shift our supplies. Additionally, there is time frame for oil. First is perception because of the fact that oil is running out and peak oil is coming, which our evidence cites China will be inherently on edge. That causes nuclear war to escalate before our evidence is specific to both oil and China, which means there's generic resource wars defense does apply. Additionally, there is spillover to the relations. Evidence is just one line. Says wishful thinking. Our long-term framework analysis on solvency disproves this argument. Even the all causes can be overcome. Now, Cuba is necessarily, may not be key themselves to relations, but the embargo is. Latin America thinks it makes us look like a bigot because we keep treating Cuba like they are acting like they were in the 80s. Now, Latin America is key to terrorism because it is a vulnerable region where people are not monitoring proliferation. It is an entry point to the United States. They can get a weapon or 1AC NTA evidence indicates that they are experts that work with them and they have the finances necessary and transportation is easy and necessarily causes exchange drops in China because people miscalc and strike them. Now we do not increase oil production. That was the analysis above. We just shift our supply. Now adaptation cannot solve versus our evidence indicates it's literally impossible because the animals we depend on will not be able to adapt. It means we cannot eat them. Additionally, their evidence is only about reptiles. I care about the warm-blooded things. Now oil cooperation is sustainable. Our evidence, like I said above, we don't shift oil. We don't decrease oil. It's a question of maintaining current production, addressing renewable energy elsewhere, but shifting supplies. T. First is we meet lifting the embargo establishes long-term trade. Second is counter-interpretation. Appeasement is a subcategory of engagement, and we meet it. This is rock to K. Appeasement and engagement are similar in overlap. In fact, it may be appropriate to link appeasement as a subcategory of engagement. And first, before interpretation, if theirs is true, no Cuban act would be topical because they necessitate lifting the embargo, and most Venezuela acts are also appeasement, so their interpretation excludes those. So we are key to Af ground, and debatability increases topic discussion, and sufficiency applies to competing interpretations. China counterplan. First is permutation do both. There are 5 disadds to the counterplan. First is the oil advantage. Proximity and expertise make the U.S. the only feasible check on Cuban oil spills. China takes 50 days. That's Stevens. And second is relations. Obviously, the counterplan does nothing to resolve U.S. energy security or U.S. relations in Latin America. Third is Latin American economy. 2 internal links. First is trade deficits. Johnson and 5. Closer ties with China have disadvantaged Latin American leaders who invest in the PRC. Notice that China exports more affordable than their own goods and contribute to the trade deficits. For every dollar Mexico makes an export to China, the PRC makes $31 million to export to Mexico. And second is economic reform. Johnson and 5. Disinterest in economic reform makes the trade model used by China undermine the progress Latin America and made toward industrialization in countries. Maybe tend to fall back on planetary economies into the rich and poor may widen. Narrowly focused on economies vulnerable to downturns, and that turns U.S. economy shift turn 12. The United States economy $60 billion. The bottom market Latin America's economy will inevitably become more crucial to U.S. economic future. And fourth disadvantage is China war. This is Ellis. And 5. China's presence in Latin America reflects significant erosion of the power geopolitical position in the U.S. These trends could bring a direct conflict between the U.S. and China. And fifth is Venezuela plan is key to boost the relations. Is Benjamin Alvarado. And 10. U.S. cooperation in China's in Cuba is in energy may create an opportunity for the U.S. to improve its relations with Venezuela. The U.S. logistical resources in Cuba that simultaneously address regional refining capacity, trade, and transit capabilities while enhancing regional cooperation and integration states. The U.S. will make some efforts to create commercial openings for energy development. And post-Chavez, the U.S. wants to be more active. Improved U.S.-Venezuelan ties will scuttle Iranian prolifs. This is Jones. And 13. That relations improved between two countries would enable the U.S. to leverage Venezuela against Iran. Venezuela and Iran. As we turn the Chavez lane here, Venezuela's helps strangle resources that support Iran's nuclear program. And Iran prolif causes the Middle East arms race result in nuclear war. This is Allison. And 6. If Iran crosses the nuclear finish line, Middle East and cascade nuclear weapons could trigger the first multi-party arms race, dramatically increasing the likelihood of regional nuclear war. Bound scenario includes accidental launch or threat of nuclear war. Has additionally, stop power doesn't matter. Their evidence does indicate a reverse conflict scenario in which if Chinese stop power doesn't collapse, they wouldn't have a good economy. Make them prove that additionally, China's Latin American engagement is unsustainable. Enemies is Armenia. And 12. There's a dark side to seeing the Latin American partnership. China's going out strategy may bring it with traditional and formal business practices and close to deal making. Chinese corruption is likely to find a welcoming environment in Latin America and could undermine the rule of law. China's foreign aid programs like transparency and accountability. Shunning. First is case outweighs extinction, species loss, and body for Liam are moral side constraints. Second is Cuba's record isn't flagrant. Their authors are biased. Lamari. In 10, the Western media has misled the public when it presents Cuba as the main violator of human rights. The U.S. cannot justify sanctions based on human rights. Not only does the U.S. have no moral authority on this subject, but also most countries on the continent have a situation worse than Cuba. Additionally, the road to hell is paved with Margaret sweat and seas. Good intentions, Isaac. In 2, any unyielding conservative moral goodness undercuts political responsibility, purity of intentions. The world of real violence, moral purity is in the form of complicity and justice. And politics is much about the unintended consequences, about the intentions, is about the effects of the action. Is most significant. It is equally important always to ask about the effects and the judge the effects of pragmatic ways. Now the Russian old said. First is no link compliant doesn't increase U.S. oil consumption, or they just make it safer. Second is worsen oil economy low. Now this is CNN 13. Despite changes, the World Bank reckons the insufficient economic growth in Russia chokes. This third is empirically that the last recession did not cause proliferation. Fourth is Russian economy resilient nil. In 13, the lack of recession is an overreaction. The economy continued to take a loan to Russian consumer economy 65% of growth that remains key in 2015. I expect a resilient private consumption, the robust wage growth. Additionally, no impact to oil prices. Rapusa. In 11, Russian growth is decoupled from prices. The sector output constrained by lack of investment production. There seems to be no immediate path for the higher oil prices, domestic confidence, and a declining oil prices bolster Russian reforms and boost labor productivity. White. In 13, the quick rebound of the oil prices after the financial crisis made everybody like some much needed reforms. So shelved is another. If there's another sharp contraction that could be healthy for Russia, that would give us a chance to think about how cutting budgetary spending boosts labor productivity. Second is reforms are critical to the long-term success of Russian economy. The economy is 622. The Kremlin appears to want growth, yet without structural reforms to diversify the economy, to improve business climate will not lay the ground for longer term. And U.S. production thumbs to the link. This is Fox News. In 13, rising production in the U.S. accounts for 60% of the fall. U.S. imports since 2006 nearly 100% since 2010. The problem for the domestic oil has never like surprising the inability to tap into the oil, but there's no doubt the process of getting fuel on the ground. Usually the internal is predicated off of prices. There's no reason why Middle Eastern oil companies or the Russian oil companies wouldn't cut production so the prices did not suddenly drop as a result. Politics. Versus won't pass GOP frontrunner 724. White House sudden change in tone is evidence of growing frustration. We have not seen evidence of House leadership mimicking the comprehensive immigration body here. Taking hands on approaches read objective to the House Republicans leadership strategy. They're not willing to go far. The means they will likely be carrying half the Senate. And 8 all causes to cyber-terrorism knocking 13. The National Security Committee is wrestling with several problems that would take considerable effort. The U.S. government has no official policy of communicating the world will do with legal basis of use conduct operations. How is the title effectively bridge cybersecurity presents a major challenge between policy and legal communities. We are still in the infancy of Einstein cybersecurity. We still don't have a right hand. Oil lobby shield is Gadoo. And 10 the oil industry has several Gulf State politicians urging bomb on the list, especially the debate about the United States of the coastline expiration exploration chance the only drilling operations begun because Cuba, if those explorations become significant amounts, just say political capital doesn't exist and isn't key to their decided winners, more likely Hirsch and 13 pole capital have no break, actually happens to most go some talked about capital immigration, the person become crazy for reasons that have little to do with pole capital, both do not happen immigration, it's entirely due to Hispanic, both pole cap is poorly defined, public get wrong emphasis, of installation, pole cap is an empty concept of winning one, she changes the escalation of the others, no capital she picks, there's no reason to think he can win more victories, pole cap calculations of possible illumines, criminal minimum, just say no vote on CIR, farm bill, pistol clip, debt ceiling, Egypt and Syria, all block those McElhinny, 714, there's a best chance coming to the fall, that could be a long shot during a period of travel, others bomb ministry who are dealing with one of the most challenging aspects of healthcare, Obama will be locked in battle over food aid, budget, GDP, borrowing, almost each trouble, and Egypt and Syria, just like Iran sponsored attack will hit U.S. soil, Iran, Venezuela, ties are key, this is Noriega, and 12, the Director of National Intelligence has fired Iranian officials now weighing more to conduct an attack against the U.S. China was aware of the plot to cover the committed terrorist bombing outside the nation's capital, the Iranian officials made no secret of the intention to carry East Metro shortage to the U.S. first assessment of Iran's willingness to attack our leaders and solely escape attention Iran will need our homeland security, very well said they can no longer ignore the real game changer, however the alliance developed between Iran and Venezuela, additionally, that causes lash out Schwartz, Morgan and one, the terrorist attacks are reactive national sentiment because the enemies never the media Islam.
Islam and what part?
The last flash out card.
Schwartz Morgan Islam.
Clarification, is that a nuclear attack or just Iran attacking us?
Attack from like an Islamic associated terrorist group. Causes retaliation.
Go ahead.
Okay. A big component of the 2AC is that the plan does not increase oil production, it merely shifts it. Where have you read any evidence or has any reason? I'm sorry, let me finish, please. Any reasonable argument that says, as a result of us doing more drilling in Cuba, that less drilling will happen elsewhere?
If I used the word production, that was a mistake. What I intended to communicate was we don't increase consumption of oil by the United States.
Okay,
we
well
just
that's
shift
fine.
where we get our
In
oil.
that case, our oil dissat is based on the production of oil messing with oil prices. Just because you do not shift U.S. consumption, how does this act as a no link to the dissat? And how does...
Our argument is also based around the fact that other countries affect the oil market because oil is a fungible commodity, right?
Okay,
Which means other countries, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Russia, have an incentive to cut production such that prices don't fall to the extent that their economies are damaged.
Where have you read any evidence that indicates that they will escape the prisoner's dilemma and will cut production?
I have not read any evidence
Okay, that's
the
good.
last 4
I'll
years.
just move on. Now, your 2AC Nell evidence says that Russia's economy is fine now. How is this not uniqueness for the negative?
The Nell evidence indicates that private consumption, which is necessary for robust wage growth, is resilient within Russia. Which means even if they're not getting oil profits, consumers within Russia will continue to spend money.
So
and that's the
not
main economic
responsive
growth.
to the oil being key to their economy. Your 2AC
Well, we
Fox
also
News
read evidence
evidence,
indicating that
your
oil isn't key
2AC
to their
Fox
economy.
News evidence says that production is decreasing imports. How do you have a link to the China advantage?
Link to the China advantage.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
If U.S. production is increasing right now, how is there a resource issue, a resource war that will happen in China?
We don't import zero oil. We are just importing
It
less
says that
oil.
there's been a 60% cause of the decline in our oil production as a
since
result of
2006. That doesn't mean we
and
import
100%
zero. We still need to
since
get oil from
2010.
somewhere.
Okay, so there is a link to the dissent then. The counter plan. The 2AC Johnson evidence says that trade deficits are bad for Latin America. How is this an answer to the counter plan?
The counterplan would involve greater economic interaction between China and Latin America.
How
thus
is this not an
increasing their
issue
trade
for the
deficit.
plan as well? How does it not also result in trade deficits for Latin America?
Because that evidence speaks to uniquely how Chinese products are comparatively so much cheaper than Latin American products. There's not any evidence to suggest that U.S. products are cheaper than Latin American
It's
products.
merely about production. Okay, that's fine. Now, your shifter evidence is about Latin America and assumes that the embargo exists. Why does the counterplan mean that non-embargo countries will no longer be trading with the United States?
Wait, which shifter evidence?
Your shifter
are you
evidence
referencing?
says that we need to trade with Latin America countries. We currently have an embargo on them. The shifter evidence says we need to continue trade with Latin America.
Are you talking about the one on this counterplan as to why Latin American economies are necessarily key to the U.S.?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have an embargo on one country in Latin America. We still trade with all of the others. If China sucks up that trade with their influence and then damages their
The
economies.
counterplan only increases trade with Cuba, though. That's fine. Your
Wait, they don't get broader influence in the region?
Your contracts evidence indicates that you've made a 2AC argument that said that there would be less contracts as a result that we don't need. That's fine.
We don't need contracts. We just need the embargo such that
So
we
then how do
can
you-
import oil. We can import oil drilled by Russian companies in Cuba as long as the embargo is removed, right?
All right. Think about Colin and Margaret appeared to have a plan. Think about Colin and Margaret appeared to have a plan going into the debate about what the negative block was going to be. They're going to discuss this right now, and they're going to verify: are we sticking with the plan, or are we going to change that plan? based on the 2AC and the cross-examination of the 2AC, think to yourself, if you were on the negative team, if you were Colin and Margaret, how would you design the negative block? And think about, all right, what am I going to go for? What's the 2N going to handle? What's the 1N going to handle? Think about that for a minute. I'm going to ask a couple of you to volunteer how you would design the negative block and for a brief explanation of why. And then we'll see if your prescriptions for what they should do match up with what they do. So what are you extending? What are you getting rid of? What's the 2N going to take? What's the 1N going to take? All right, who's got a prescription for an effective negative block that they would like to share with the group? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, all right. That's a reasonable option. So he suggests that they punt the counter plan. Don't talk about T. Get rid of the shunning argument. Let's just go for the Russia DA and let's go for the politics DA, and then let's do a lot on the case. I like that blueprint. That's a pretty good blueprint. Who's got a different suggestion for how they should design this negative block? Yours different, Harry, or was that yours? That was yours? Okay. Okay, explain your justification for that. Okay. Nobody else has any? That's the only option they got? There's no other possibility? Nobody has any? Okay, what do you got? So you think they should extend the counterplan. Okay, why should they extend the China counterplan? Can't hear you. Okay, so you think they might extend it because there were questions about it in the cross-text. I think that makes sense. If the counterplan is not going to be in the negative block, then it would be curious if Margaret asked about it, but she might be asking a little bit of a fake-out question. She might be asking about the counterplan. Sharon's sitting over there. She's like, ooh, she's asking about the counterplan. Let me start thinking about what I'm going to say about the counterplan, and then it turns out the counterplan is not in the negative block. So it's possible that she was just asking that kind of question. Go ahead. They do, yep. So nobody's got any other designs for the negative block? Interesting. Okay. Colin, give me another option. Okay, so they could. What else would be in the block if they did that? Relax. The mention of an impact turn doesn't mean that we have to become stupid. Colin, go ahead. Just the case? So your negative block is just the case and a new impact turn. Okay. I don't think that makes very much sense. Ayush. Yeah, that makes some more sense. The counterplan probably doesn't solve that. They could concede that the counterplan doesn't solve that. So that could be a new net benefit to the counterplan. I like that negative block a lot more because that gives them some more options. All right, we're going to find out now what the 2NC is going to take. When he gives his roadmap, I want you to think, all right, what does the roadmap tell me about both what's going to be in the 2NC, but also what Margaret is likely to be discussing in her 1NR. And then I want you, as the negative block develops, we're not going to talk again until the end of the negative block. I want you to think about what possible negative ballots are being written by Colin and Margaret during this negative block. What options remain open, which options are going away, which options are being real credibly extended, which options maybe are there, but they're not super in-depth, they're not super credible. And we're going to talk again after Margaret's 1NR. So,
China, solvency, oil, relations. China counterplan, solvency, the oil advantage, and the relations advantage. My bad.
All right, settle back in. Confusion about the oil advantage and oil disadvantage has almost derailed the debate. So we're back.
Man, can you clarify? We were gonna get it.
You all right?
Maybe if this one saves 9 minutes.
All right, settle in. I'm excited to hear this negative block. You should be too. All right, take it away.
Is anyone not ready? The China counterplan solves the oil advantage. China invests in modernizing Cuban oil drilling technology, which solves their safety issues. The counterplan boosts Chinese soft power, which is key to preferential trade agreements, which solves Chinese economic collapse that leads to regional instability, nuclear terrorism in war. Now the limelight Repco has more hats than they have good arguments on this fall. The counterplan versus a permutation to both links to the benefit of Chinese soft power, zero sum in U.S. influence in Latin America. Ye-10. The rise of China's soft power in America has been important. Success depends on whose story wins this year. China reducing America's influence internationally. And it's zero sum. China competes with the U.S. CSI. It's not China to increase the soft power to play an achievement role in international competition. The relationship between U.S. and Chinese soft power. The game is zero sum, so an increase in U.S. soft power will result in the decline in Chinese soft power. China's model of the developing countries alternative to Washington consensus. Now they say we can't solve the oil advantage. China can finance modernization. The Cuba's oil industry earn 12 corporations focus on building a critical infrastructure for trying to help Cuba incrementally upgrade its technical capability. IQ offered extension to repayment of the previous loans. The visit declared way for CNCP to invest in $6 billion in USD in the expansion of the oil farming. The complex expected process reserves on tap fields in Cuba's north coast. Now they say we can't solve the relations advantage. However, we can solve the China scenario. The counterplan locks in oil supply for Chinese energy demand, which solves the aggression. They have zero evidence indicates the U.S. would initiate the resource war between the U.S. and China, and other spots would be able to solve the U.S. domestic market for oil, like Mexico, Canada, and Saudi Arabia, as well as the U.S. domestic market for oil. Now he reads a few economy turns to grip them. First, all the counterplan does is invest in developing Cuban offshore drilling that is safe. It is not a larger trade agreement that would affect deficits. The counterplan just locks in that China buys Cuba's oil, plus their deficit turns don't have any internal warrant about why it's key to the overall economy. There's no new one-year cards on that warrant that skews negative block strategy. Their economic reform turn also does not make any sense. There's no unique reason why the counterplan would cause China to cause all the countries in the region to copy China's economic model. There's no reason economic reform is key to growth, and also Cuba is not key to the U.S. economy. It's obviously improved by the embargo of the existing status quo. They read this China war turn is literally has no warrant in the card. All it says is that it could bring us to a conflict between the United States and China, not necessarily military conflict. It would just be disagreements over small tensions. There's no reason why that escalates global nuclear war. Now the Venezuela add-on. There's no risk of Venezuelan cooperation. Universal 13 Maduro said to terminate his government talks with Obama would stress to implement zero tolerance policy for aggression to Venezuela. Enough is enough. Stay away with your empire. Do not mess with Venezuela. Venezuela President recommendation of statements about power. When she went to Congress, she went crazy and started to attack Venezuela. Venezuela will not accept any pressures and deterrence checks to Iran war. Economists 7 Iran seems rational. There's calculation behind the poster knowing the nuclear attack on Israel result in its prompt annihilation. Iran would probably be just as other nuclear powers have been. Iran proliferation doesn't cause war. Logan and Carpenter 7. An Iran nuclear weapon have little offensive use. It's important to evaluate Iran's actions. Consider the Iran-Iraq nuclear war falling out devastating consequences. They would outright defeat possible Iranian leadership's change course. They sued for peace. Would make rational calculations. Now they say that soft power, that Chinese soft power doesn't have a matter. However, extended across one is the internal link evidence. Soft power is key to preferential trade agreements in the region, which allows China to sustain its economy. The economic decline leads to escalating conflict as well as regional instability throughout Asia. That's or plate evidence. Now they say that Chinese soft power is unsustainable in the region. This evidence has no warrant. Their evidence says the engagement increases corruption. But this is only Chinese aid programs, not Chinese. There's no warrant why that would apply to our cooperation with their oil companies. There's no warrant why this collapses their soft power or undermines the net benefit, and it's non-unique. There's not much transparency or accountability or lack of corruption in Cuba that exists in the status quo. Now, Chinese economic downturn sparks Taiwan World Lewis 10 to keep China to the society stable. That minimum growth is 7.2%. Anything else would be unemployment, a rising mass population becomes unsustainable. This will lead to a rise. This can the Communist Party becomes a very real challenge. China might go out of the way. The Yugoslavia chaos, civil unrest, interceding war. The Chinese government might seek to maintain national cohesion. Might go into war with Taiwan, whom America's pledged to defend. Chinese growth solves terrorism. Class with 10. A strong service sector would support a real middle class work. Some stabilizing social pressure. Wealthy, stable China can be should be more likely to ensure regional peace and stability. Chinese fears marginalized. Making sure trying to find common use and combating terrorism, becoming more involved in curbing proliferation. Chinese soft power solves warming spurs. Modeling CSI is 9. Chinese obstruction is the primary goal to obstacle to global efforts. Common concentration. China would do something. So if incentive actual Chinese recognize that the threat of concentration is real, and they have significant steps in the recent years to counter threat. China has mustered away the legislative, economic, and criminal restrictions to foster shifts in the sustained
sustainable industrial activity since the gaps between well-intentioned rhetoric and concrete action remain now. The solvency flow first extended. One Cuba says no to the plan. He has his answer to this is so undeveloped. He is more underdeveloped than the Tracy and Casey Harrigan. They don't want to change the relationship with the U.S. They're skeptical of U.S. interests and need to maintain the perception that the U.S. is their enemy to sustain their domestic stability. That's our French evidence. Preferred this evidence 3 years older than 3 years newer than their Benjamin Alvarado 1AC card. Their CES evidence, our evidence assumes to keep its current opinion. They don't need the United States. Other international companies solve oil drilling, which means there's no economic incentive for the plan. The plan is also not perceived as an all branch. It's perceived as a self-interested policy move by the United States to get more oil to beat out competing with China. In this case, the entirety of the AF say no means there's no U.S. exports get involved to solve their first advantage. It also means that we don't get any access to Cuban oil, which takes out solvency to their China advantages. Also, they wouldn't boost relations because we wouldn't be increasing any cooperation with Cuba in the status quo, and China will say no. CNN 11. Cuba's leaders do not want to normalize ties with the U.S. because they would lose their excuse to save the country. China's response to U.S. efforts to improve relations or entrench regime relations of sour because resorting so much stronger language and Raul and Fidel proved that there's no interest in political reform or any of these sanctions. Now the oil advantage extend across our Grady evidence. There's no oil drilling that exists in status quo, or at least there won't be a whole lot of it, which means there's no major risk of their terminal impact. Even if Russia's playing in the future, that does not mean that it's going to happen quickly. Or plus the Russians have a lot of experience drilling oil in status quo, which proves that our arguments about why the U.S. safety experts should not key. I'll get to those now. All of the underlined portions of their evidence is sufficient for us to win the debate on U.S. exports are not key. First, our officials from the Environmental Defense Fund and the EPA both confirm that Cuban drilling is safe. Prefer their opinion because they're usually hardline environmentalists, and if they're not complaining, then no one should. That's their aggressive and bullshit evidence. The card that I read in 1AC Cross 6 Plus, the Cubans have studied the Deepwater Horizon spill more seriously in the United States, and they model the U.S. safety drilling regulations in the status quo, which means they do everything in a similar way to the United States, and the counterplan would be able to resolve all the technology issues because we just have China pump a bunch of money there would be able to solve those issues in the status quo. Now, non-prevention efforts are solving the status quo. Said ASCII 11 of fiercely Cuban oil drilling possibly environmental threats because the prohibition of oil below Cuba as much as an incentive because safe drilling reports indicate Cuba is taking safety seriously. Cuban oil industry put a lot of research into what will be required and are very knowledgeable of the practices and incorporate the principles of safety in planning. Now, go to our environment defense. The oil spills have happened dozens of times past. Exxon Valdez, Deepwater Horizon, as well as a whole bunch of others in history. There's no reason why this new scenario would any be worse. There's also no reason why Cuba is a unique hotspot. There are plenty of other hotspots around the world that have experienced much more environmental devastation that would happen because of one oil spill having its status quo. Our Kennedy evidence indicates that marine ecosystems are uniquely more resilient than other ecosystems because there are a lot of species are more redundant in the oceans that are they can more easily adapt to changing circumstances. It's particularly proven by future oil spills like the one that happened in Deepwater Horizon, which is not that far away from where the Cuban oil spill would have potentially happened. That's our strengthening card. Don't underestimate the power of ecosystems to absorb shocks in the status quo. Now the economy resilient evidence extend across our U.S. economy resilient. Our EIU evidence indicates that we've withstood a debt downgrade as well as many other shocks since 2009, which means there's zero risk of a collapse of the U.S. economy. The economy has withstood worse shocks. Johnson 13, the U.S. economy has not been fragile. The U.S. has fallen from major debt crisis in Europe, going over the fiscal cliff, gas prices, tsunami in Japan, Hurricane Sandy, which shut down the stock exchanges for a couple days. These are not signs of a fragile economy. Now the relations advantage extend across our first piece of argument that Cuba is not necessarily for Chinese energy demand. Other oil markets would be able to check the competition. That's the argument I made early on the counterplan. Mexico, Canada, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia all proved that we would have other supplies that would be able to resolve their concerns. It allows us to diversify away from the Middle East, which means there would be no escalation of conflict. Plus, their evidence does not have any brink or time frame about when there's peak oil is going to happen, which means it could happen decades in the future, especially considering the U.S. has just amped up oil production in the short term now. Now, extend across our resource theory, is a dumb card. Our Victor evidence indicates that they're very expensive and counterproductive to economic growth. It is easier to get resources at the stock exchange than at the end of a gun barrel. Their terminal impact to the China war scenario is based on Taiwan. We access through the counterplan. However, we have terminal impact defense to their internal link, which is resource wars, which means China war only happens in a world without soft power.
You good?
Yep.
All right. Let's talk about China first. Read a bunch of cards indicating that soft power is zero sum. There are single cards indicating that economic trade with Latin America is also zero sum.
We argue that the way that soft power is attained through trade, or that is one of the ways.
Okay, let's talk about the solvency for oil. You basically read this card that says that China will throw unlimited money at the problem if companies drilling in Cuba are barred from buying the best parts and technology from the U.S. Why does it matter if they have the money to spend on it?
That argument assumes that the U.S. has the only ability or the only access to that technology. China can buy the technology on the free market and send it to Cuba.
Is there a card on that, or just your personal understanding of the embargo?
That's my personal understanding of the embargo.
Okay. So I want to talk about this. You no-link the economy turn by saying that China will not increase a bunch of trade with Latin America.
That's not the argument. The argument is that your two cards, your first trade deficit card does not have a warrant as about why trade deficits
Okay, I get the
would
index
collapse
of the turn
economies.
themselves, but I'm asking
Okay.
about the no-link argument.
No, the no-link argument is applied specifically to your economic reforms evidence, which assumes that China would
that's fine.
force its economic model and all those
I want to talk
countries.
about the
which I don't
2NC
think is
China
necessarily
collapse
true.
evidence indicates that if China were to collapse, they could go the way of Yugoslavia or the Soviet Union. Did either of them attack random rivals when they collapsed? Yugoslavia or Soviet Union?
Yeah, but that doesn't assume a China that has 1 billion people,
All right,
as well as one that has a regime that is trying to sustain credibility with its people. Our evidence indicates that to do so, they would likely try to
That's cool.
annex Taiwan.
Let's talk about the China power solves warming. This evidence says, quote, if only the Chinese would do something, perhaps the U.S. would have an incentive to act as well. Do you fiat China does something about warming besides investing in a ton of oil?
It sounds pretty similar to what the plan does, and
Okay.
that solves warming. So,
Let's talk about the drilling safety evidence. You cite a bunch of reports that our authors talk about that say that Cuba is like the safest country drilling in the world.
okay, look, we're not.
Any
Look,
evidence?
don't exaggerate our claim.
Okay,
we have
okay, fine,
cited
no
evidence from the
exaggeration.
Environmental Defense Fund and
I
the
apologize
EPA,
for
which I think
claiming
are
you
pretty credible.
exaggerated.
Go
Do
ahead.
you have any lines from our cards or cards about yours that talk about the safety of Norway?
Yeah.
Well, which one?
The glass evidence indicates they're a, quote, proven operator.
All right, India,
Don't know. I'd have
Russia.
to read more of your cards. Russia?
China,
Russia, China.
Venezuela, Malaysia,
Yeah, we funded
Vietnam.
Actually,
all of those companies have to drill in Cuban waters.
Okay.
Which means if they follow Cuban safety standards, which your evidence says are fine, that means that it resolves all those questions.
Okay, let's talk about the Cuba say no discussion. Do you have any evidence that mentions Cuba's willingness to take oil money, or just that they don't want to be besties?
I don't
Just
know.
the besties one?
The 1 in C, we have a card about oil. The 2 in C does not read a card about oil.
Okay, lastly, I want to talk about the econ card. It says that we can overcome a lot of problems. Does it cite anything about oil as one of those problems we can overcome?
Repeat the question.
Oh, it's okay.
Just
It
don't
doesn't.
know.
Alright, think for a minute about what you think the winner are.
I'm okay with just extending these paragraphs, right? The 8 for 9 will turn. No terror, they're derps, and speeds me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank God.
Alright, settle down.
Okay. Did you guys get the email?
Yeah, I have to open it.
Okay, the order is shunning, politics, relations, start at the nuclear terror portion, specifically the 1 NC number 9, and then the oil disad.
You're gonna have to give me a sec just to get my
It's all
stuff
good.
in order. Shunning. What? Your fault. Here, I'll get your back. Okay, that should be good.
Settle down.
I will repeat the order in case anyone needs it. Shunning, politics, relations, start at the 1 NC number 9. Then the oil disad. There is an overview on the oil disad. My orders are nothing if not thorough.
It's a. I'd like you to.
The card overview, so please.
Case. Going for it. New sheet of paper.
Okay. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
If you're talking, you don't sound ready.
Oh wait, sorry.
Oh, not you. Okay. Shunning not going for it, we'll concede the consequences that way. Politics, we're also not going for this. We'll concede the cyber terror defense. Adam, what's the answer to the 2 NC relations now? Who to the 1 NC number 9 extend the the 1 NC number 8 first extend the Chapman evidence. The technology is foreign to no probability of it. And now I will read some more more confident, even if they have this technology, there's no motive kept her. It's not clear terrorist organization confronted device that extended evidence indicates that the terrorist squad fought actually nuclear weapons shown to destructive large scale devastation negatively also die against the terrorist squad. I am population sympathetic to their cause for horrific destruction nuclear explosion. This is audience people otherwise civilized and ready to conclude a part of nuclear device the terrorists are far away for support. Even if they did upon one retaliate, Washington Post in 2007 Obama would not use nuclear weapons to circumvent to fight the terrorists. I don't think it would have been far mistake for using nuclear weapons in any circumstance. Not on the table now the warming advantage reading this advantage with oil is the logic that justifies a PETA member running a dogfighting circuit. Liam just lies. Economic incentive means that output will increase even just because we go to Cuba. Do not let the one actually make an argument out of this. It is basically blow at this point. That's the one in C number 9. They massively increase oil production, which means that there's no momentum for them to be able to solve warming until they can logically explain this advantage. Then you should just float as a non-argument now. So the one in C number 10 species are able to adapt. This is about species that live in warm temperatures, which is the main place where warming takes place. That the species are able to adapt quickly to a change allowing for survival. Here's some more evidence. Air negative, even if feedbacks are somewhat in the middle, adaptation cells Ridley in control the lesson of the field of predictions. Ecological X is not the inevitable ground possibilities excluded. We or evidence of lukewarm device to positive feedback to the vapor allowed to know short to 1 to 2 degrees Celsius and 1 minute century. The Greenland device to G is present incorporated less than 1% of the century. This is survival to temperature launch for the digits quite change the keep it less quality damage with all in one congestion via technology making about the features positive by seal to the people potentially the stream of the capsule called global COVID. Mission of also the human card to be knocked back. Ecological talks by innovating Gchat overview to AC was so bad that Liam might end up single unanswered impact of the Gchat Russian economic class causes a nuclear terrorist attack, cascading proliferation in the U.S. drawing all gets to extinction. Prefer the scenario over the affirmative because it is the only existential risk posture and to existential risk are useful to think about other risks of even worst cases after the mere rebel state unsuitably affected a long trip beta bars easy to create mutually central risk emergence role of the nuclear arsenal. The U.S. has nuclear war substantial probability the consequences of codified the global determinant of nuclear or not their species. They've already conceded proliferation and terrorists also makes their environmental and China impacts and Neville David in 99 interpretation war of Russia and economic deterioration prime causes relatively economy of COVID less than the same to pay our stats and Moscow receives a little return Russia to come to internal the consequences of the United States and Europe and to be severe battle Russian part of the Russia China damage to the fighting particularly attacks on nuclear bombs poison the environment choicing number 1. They've already run the entire advantage based on getting oil from Cuba to prevent China resource for that. For that to be true, there has to be an impact on the oil market. 2 is large untapped reserves in Cuba, double U.S. estimates and Teskey, and all U.S. survey estimates Cuba offshore oil fields will have a billion barrels of comfortable oil to Cuba to feed natural gas. Energy company and actual reserve of the U.S. estimate now. 2AC number 2 external listing evidence. Russia's economy has jumped out of European nations because of high oil prices. Even if this part of the article is right that says that Russia has some economic issues, the thesis of the article is that oil is propping up Russia and the entirety of Europe's economy. 2 is prefer evidence statistics using proper methodology. Confirm that Russia's economy is growing fast right now. Business use Europe in 717 the committed external GDP growth rates is relative to comparison to the North relatively large difference in the 2 leading emerging markets for Russia is income country. China's recently moved to the middle of the bracket. Russia's going about as far as fast among the emerging markets. The second biggest consumer market in the country and will soon become the biggest consumer market in all of Europe in the next few years. Choice number 3, there are risk of a distinction between a recession and depression. The last full collapse of the Russian economy is over oil and led to the collapse of the USSR. Proves the ability of our impact to happen. Choice is that the choice cites no previous recession. What the effects were, don't let the 1 year extend a non-argument. Choice number 4, this is negative evidence. This is that the Russian economy is fine now because of consumer shift. Doesn't assume a massive change in the oil market. It's not predictive. We're talking about oil markets that affects the economy cross-apply and to the choice cross-apply to the choice number 2 about the economy because it answers their unique arguments. 2 is the Duffy evidence says that the entirety of the Russian economy is premised upon oil. Last time there was a collapse of the oil market, the USSR collapsed. Choice number 5, when oil puts the economy on its back. I extend the Duffy evidence. The major shock of the Russian oil sector has led to the fall of the USSR invasion of Georgia, etc. The Russian government gets most of its revenue from oil and relies on it. 2 is the evidence indicates a slight depression, separation of the correlation of the economy and oil prices. Prefer Duffy, which quantifies the actual impact of oil prices on the economy. 3 is lower oil prices trigger Russian economic recession. Gulf Times. 13, one of us extended to ever Russia. Many others infested are cutting some of their concerned over lower prices. Markets puts the country in a recession. Polly, growth second Israeli in April. This year is linear every 10, and 4 is the link is linear every $10 decrease in oil prices cuts Russian economy at 1%. Synchrony and on oil prices remain one of the main factors in the development of Russian economy. Experts know that every $10 annual price of the Russian economy grows by 1%. The formula also works in reverse. Choice number 6. 1 puts the cart before the horse. Our Duffy evidence indicates that the economy will collapse from declining oil prices before the reforms can solve it. It proves their reform to the economy. Evidence says that reformed economy needs to happen to prevent oil shocks from collapsing the economy. 2's reforms are pipe dream heritage and which been in 621. Put it in other reforms need to shift the economy reducing oil. That's what the reforms being or not politics the part of the problem. Many problems of the world Russian below but it's kind of the source of political business and outside they're pretty more wrong with the event of climate trust agreement as opposed to rule of law. Choice number 7 for this to be true they can't have a China resource wars advantage. 2 is U.S. oil pressures are decreasing now more in 718 despite a continued economic growth in China what's under to stabilize in which the decline of U.S. oil prices as Mark said there. The other answer is derp. Economic incentives mean that this won't happen.
All right, Sharon's going to need a couple minutes here to prep. Before we start talking about the negative blocks, it's a good time in the debate to start thinking about kind of taking stock of what's happened so far. Think to yourself, what is the best connection that the negative has made so far in the debate? So as you think back, so we're kind of at a natural breaking point in the debate. Looking back at the whole debate up to now, what is the best connection that the negative has made in the debate? What is the best connection that the affirmative has made in the debate? Who has a thought on either one of those, negative or affirmative?
It's more just a plot.
Who is that, Nikhil? I can't hear you. Speak up a little bit. Yeah, so there was a moment in the second negative constructive where Colin kind of slowed down. He said, we can beat this advantage using only quotations from the affirmative evidence. I thought that was a pretty powerful connection moment. Who's got a different one? Who's got a moment from the debate that they remember? Either a good moment for the negative or a good moment for the affirmative? Natalie, what do you got?
I think the moment where that connection was made even better was during the process of the student. It was pretty funny, but then he was just like, no, it's about regulations and it's something to drill the seaweed waters and it doesn't matter for the student.
Yeah, so Colin made a connection there. I think he made another big connection in the speech on U.S. technology not key, and that was just a good moment of the 2NC. And then he backed up that connection in the cross-section. So Liam knew that was a moment of the 2NC that was powerful for the negative, and so he chose to challenge it in the cross-section. That was great. Colin stood his ground there, though, and he maintained the integrity of that argument that he connected on. I think that was a pretty good moment for the negative. Does anyone have a different thought about a moment where the negative made a strong connection in the debate? I'm not seeing any hands, but it's possible that I'm missing one. Who has a thought about what the best connection the affirmative has made so far in the debate? What's the best affirmative connection in the debate so far? Affirmative has made no connection so far in the debate? No one thought that there hasn't been a moment in a cross-examination, there wasn't a moment in the 2AC. No moment where the affirmative kind of got you with something that's going to stick with you? Yeah?
I like the one in the cross-section where it starts listing off all the countries that are doing.
So you think that the connection was made on the same issue, but by the affirmative. So there's a lot of different companies that have oil companies that are going to be drilling, countries that have oil companies that are going to be drilling in Cuba, and maybe their track records are not as good. Yeah?
I got a connection with the argument that 2AC a lot on stills and on like Russian oil about like that they don't increase like oil on.
Okay. So the kind of like, we're not a big enough link to the DA, but we still make it safer for drilling to happen. It's going to happen anyway. We should do the plan so that it's safer. Okay, I like that. What negative options remain in the debate? What negative ballots still remain open to Colin as he's starting to think about what he's going to go for in the 2NR? What are his options? Someone raise your hand and explain what the options are. Is that Eric? Yep, Eric. Okay. Yep. Okay. So he's got two basic options. I don't think there's really a third, unless I haven't thought about it either. So he can either go for the counter plan and the net benefit to the counter plan, the internal thing about soft power, or he can go for the case and the disad, the oil disad. Think for a minute about which 2NR strategy you think that Sharon and Liam, as they're preparing for this 1AR, should consider the more threatening of the two. Think about that for a second. Think, not talk. Think about that for a second, what you would decide. And I want to get someone to share what they think. So what's the more threatening 2NR option at this point in the debate, at this moment in the debate, looking forward? Is it the case and the Russian oil disadvantage, or is it the China counterplan and the China soft power net benefit? Who has a thought? Who wants to share? Ayush, what do you think?
I think the counterplan is more threatening.
Okay, why do you think the counterplan is more threatening? Okay.
Also, like the arguments at the end where like we saw carriers all morning. Those are like pretty good arguments. But, like even if they don't solve the
They might solve the terminal effects. It's sort of like a turns case kind of thing on a dissat, except it's with the counter plan. I like that.
I think also like the negative answers to the relation
Are strong. Okay, so it's not going to solve relations. He's going to have to go for that defense, but you're feeling good about that defense. What do you think? Yeah, so Colin started to establish some layering between his case arguments and his counterplan arguments. And that'll serve him well if he tries to put that speech together in the 2NR, because the first time that he's putting the pieces together already happened. This isn't putting the pieces together 101, it's putting the pieces together 201 or 301. What do you think, Munoz?
So the counterplan's build, and then it just comes down to dissat versus relations, and then the dissat treats a lot of impacts. He's got the Taiwan external, but I think that the 2NR, presumably depending on how the 1AR happens, could just be like the counterplan and dissat with the solvency page.
Okay.
I think he like starts setting up the 2NR framing with like, he gives a reason why China says no, and then he gives a reason why if they wouldn't say no, then it wouldn't boost relations because they would cooperate.
That's creative. Okay.
And so like he could presumably just go for the counterplan dissat with solvency.
Okay.
And not necessarily have to get to the relations. So he could put it in the roadmap if he has time, but he doesn't have
He doesn't need to win the match. That's an interesting kind of maneuver that brings together arguments from several flows. That's I wonder if Colin's trying to set that up. That's an interesting possibility. If you were the affirmative and you were about to give this 1AR, think about how you would roadmap the 1AR. There's a lot of arguments to cover. They're not on that many different pages. The negative block definitely condensed. They definitely picked out of some stuff. They've made it a bit smaller. Anshuman, what do you guys? Okay. Okay.
But potentially, if they were in a nice spot, they go for this counterplan and just say no and go in for that benefit. And then say net benefit.
What's the DH of the perm? Is there one? They'd have to win a little net benefit to make that a perm. That's creative, but yeah, I don't think that's doable unless they've got a DH of the permutation that's a little. Doesn't have to be great, but it's got to be a little bit.
Yeah. Well, to win the perm, I think that you have to win the best of the three options, right? Because otherwise, there's no reason the app is a net good idea.
Right.
So, presumption gives asking why. What does that matter?
What do you guess?
Yeah, I just was going to say, I don't think there would be a net benefit to the firm. Because they said no, then I think, yeah, like, you know,
yeah, but there's no dissad to the perm either. So, the permutation. Yeah, no reason not to do the perm. We could get into some tricky kind of presumption waters, and maybe the second rebuttals will maybe mention that if that's the position that they settle on.
I have a question.
Ricardo has a question?
What do you think is less change, the counterplan or the plan? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Why do you think the counterplan non? Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That's something to keep in mind when you're thinking of presumption questions. What is less change from the status quo?
There will now be a secondary afterlap after this debate where I will explain why that argument is dumb.
And a third dairy where I will explain why it's not.
This will be the 3R to 3R. I won't go to any of
All right, think about the roadmap. Think about the roadmap you're going to establish for the 1AR. What do you got to think about when you're setting up your roadmap? How do you establish the 1AR roadmap? Is there like a formula? What are you thinking about, Connor?
I'm thinking about which is the strongest solvency deficit, the counterplan, whatever you can do.
Okay, I like that. So Connor says, figure out which part of the case you're going to win that the counterplan doesn't solve, and then decide which order to put the case based on that. So put the case argument, the case advantage that you think you have a better shot at winning a good solvency deficit to the counterplan for, and make that one higher in the order, because because that one matters a lot. It's both your advantage and it's your advantage against the counterplan. So that makes a lot of sense. That's a good consideration. What else are you thinking about as you're designing your 1AR roadmap? What are you thinking about? What do you think about when you're...
Relations advantage, the China flow, the oil disad,
Okay, so Munoz has proposed a very advanced roadmap. Say it again so that everybody can hear you.
relations, solvency, the China page, oil disad, oil advantage.
Why did he put the oil advantage last? Hobby, partner, why did he do that? The counterplan solvent. So it's fine if he gets there, but if he doesn't get there, who cares? It's probably not the advantage he's going for in the 2AR. What, you got a counter proposal?
I think that that's okay, is because there's a block on it.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like the reason I would put it at the bottom of this instance is if there's no
And put it up higher because you got to make sure that you answer that. Yeah, so I like that a lot. So the thinking that went into that roadmap is, all right, what is the advantage that I need the most? What advantage is going to be in most 2ARs? And then what other argument do I need? Solvency's got to be there because if you lose solvency, you also lose that advantage. So you need solvency. Then which is the more threatening off-case argument? They decided it's the China counterplan. What's the less threatening off-case argument? It's the Russian oil dissat. And then let's put that other advantage that is unlikely to be in the 2AR at the bottom. And if I get through it and I get there and I extend that, great, I'm putting more pressure on Colin. If I don't get there and I don't get to spend very much time there, it's not really a big deal because that was unlikely to be what Liam's going to go for in the 2AR anyway. Does that make sense, everybody? You should be really thinking as you are given the 1AR, I mean, as you're given any speech, about what your roadmap is and about what order you're going to put your arguments. It makes a big difference. And the questions that you ask yourself in establishing the roadmap are the same questions you should be asking yourself to figure out your strategy and figure out where you're going to spend your time, the kind of decisions that you need to make as the debate evolves to narrow the debate. You feeling good?
I
All right.
think
That's not very good. I think it's Andy's.
It's Andy's.
I like it.
I would like it.
Okay, are we ready for an order? Solvency, spills, relations, China, Russia. Okay, I'm gonna repeat it. Solvency, spills, relations, China, Russia. I didn't even see it. Is it bad?
He sent an email. I don't know.
Hope not.
Oh.
Alright, settle down. Close in order.
Are we good? Try or die affirmative. China is too slow of a model to solve any of the impacts, and Russia is empirically denied. The warming is going to outweigh in the short term because it's a question of whether or not we're able to increase and create a bridge. Fuel period economies all collapse also complicates all of their interlinked and happens faster than the counterpunch ability to resolve it. Next is the state estimate. All of your evidence is rhetoric versus reality. People want an experts agree means to prefer indicative evidence that's all predicted with the likely business models and deals that create beneficial partnerships means they're going to say yes. Next is spills first that Russia is bad at doing things like oil production. 12 different countries are increasing drilling to only try or die affirmative on this question. Next is U.S. experts are best, they're better at doing things like tech, and experts are better at things like relief wells, and also they're crowd of people doing bad in the status quo. Cuban is not safe and status quo. That's things like current productions and studies, not whether or not they actually scale up and get production to occur. Means there's no risk of the affirmative. Next, that the biodiversity impact versus other spills trigger the impact creates a brink indicates that we need rigs are drilling deeper now than they ever have before. Means it's unlike anything we've ever seen. Also, there's 12 plus other countries drilling to increase the reach. He said there's no hotspots, but hotspots are keeping things in medicine and agriculture, even if it's not key to worldwide biodiversity. Key things like regional collapse to build resilient ecosystems in a regional area. Also, he says redundancy, but that doesn't matter because things like warming kills, adaptation, faster internal link, collapse also outweighs and turns all of their impacts. Our evidence poster chase indicates the empirics do not matter because they don't things like a sharp oil downturn or sharp outline or the collapse of the total oil industry also indicates there's not a transition period. The economic climate also leads to drama. It's the only scenario for war. Next is relations. This is a massive solvency deficit to the counterpart person that he said other people fill in, but that proves that left the Russia link is triggered and that leads to only risk that things like warming is decreased because things like spills decrease cooperation. Also means there's no environmental stasis that's created. He says there's no time frame peak over. We capture future supplies. We prefer evidence because it postdates Victor. It also is not good enough. It doesn't indicate it's not a question of last resort. It's a question of whether there's high risk miscalculation because people literally don't have enough food or anything or don't have enough food to be able to eat. It also increase the risk of things like tide. Long wars. It's also faster interlink than the counterplan is able to resolve. Next is the terrorism fate. We're not going for it. We'll concede there's no motivation, no use to retaliation. Means there's only scenario for things like nuclear war and lash out is in the world in which things like US and China and Russia get drawn on. We're the fastest interlinked up. And there's only a risk of this in the world of the counterplan. Next is the warming debate versus our studies post-8 years are about to indicate this is net. Only thing US can do your feedback models don't assume things like radiation or water vapor, and also indicates our greener evidence. We can solve things like greener development, increase things like participation, creates a bridge time for people. Next to the China debate versus China influence increase in the status quo even to an artistic counterplan. You cannot get out of the turn debate versus the permutation solve. The permutation both is able to solve their own result. Trade is not a zero from question, but presence in the region is only the counterplan will maintain presence in the region. I mean, this is a net offense to the offense to the counterplan or net offense to the counterplan. Also, Chinese tech is going to be net worseness of those tech is better. Evidence only indicates things like TV and light industries. Next is that there's several pieces of offense. Chinese engagement inevitably fails. Just a question of forcing them out before tensions are able to escalate. They closed door deals and corruption ensures unsustainable growth. That's not just a question of aid. It's a question of their economic engagement. Or that's our army evidence. Also, just because people dig Buddhism doesn't mean they're okay with wage exploitation, which is the main problem with Chinese software. No reverse causal claim means to try or die. Also, even if they're able to solve things like oil spills, worse for the environment. Warming Gallery 13. Producing natural resource commodities brings major environmental risk of Chinese to find Latin American most sensitive areas such as the Amazon and the Highlands. Also, several disadvantages to economic action. First, things like relations and oil spills are obviously impact. Those are impact of case. Second is things like Latin American relations or Latin American economy. First, interlinks that trade deficits are cheaper for Chinese goods. It's not a question of U.S. because there's literally a 31-to-1 ratio between China and Latin America, which doesn't exist in the case of U.S. trade. Because we create wage gap models that don't decrease the collapse of regional economy. Last, he also says the counterplan leads to a better model. That soft power copying model is in tension because you cannot have soft power and adapt to every model and then have a model that applies to all of Latin America. Next is the China war add-on. First, Ellis is better than your Turley. He makes an analytical argument about the nature of presence. Our evidence indicates that literally when China is in, the reason that is the problem indicates there's not going to be a workaround for things like trade, but that just leads to lash out faster. Also indicates the relative power increase, the risk of miscalculation. Literally, the U.S. and China have past historical ties that do not mean they're going to invade. Next is the Venezuela add-on. Will concede the impact means it's not an external offense. He also says the sustainability big first that China, or he says turn China war. We the only scenario for China war also doesn't turn warming because you are a bad model because they have increased CO2 in the United States and a slower transition. Russia. We solve a faster internal link to things like Russian economy. Even if Boston was correct about the terminal impact, we solve a faster way to solve the environment. Also, turns we also are able to solve before either of the turns case mark arguments. Like next is there's two arguments here that matter. First is that slow production is coming, and the status quo means that only a link to risk of things like shocks that happen to the economy before the Russian economy can collapse. The second is the only risk that other people will accentuate the risk and make it net works for the planet. The only world of the collapse happens in a world without the aft. Next is the economy. European resilience debate. First is their business news evidence that China's economy is doing great now, and the only scenario for collapse is that things like resource wars are going to occur. There's also a high amount of resiliency. It's a big internal resilience to the global economy. Russia is also resilient because multiple crises prove our World Bank evidence indicates that they have different checks in place. There's also a reason why Saudi Arabia is going to check high prices. They're the largest spare capacity economist 11. Saudi Arabia is the world's chief who helps only produce specific capacity quickly reduce the oil price to Russia. Saudi Arabia does not want to see the point where the world economy is damaged demand for us. This also means that they're committed to things like decoupling. Kann 11. Saudi Arabia can keep the side of stable cushion either per capita capacity stable as a market that's empirically has a moderate or that doesn't matter. Also next is decoupling doesn't matter. She said that collapse leads to recession. This doesn't mean that economic reforms are coming in the status quo. U.S. production empirically might have been high, but our evidence indicates that we'll concede your Morrison evidence indicates that U.S. production is declining now, which means only a risk that mass reforms in things like 2006 or 2010 should have triggered the internal link. Also, you can see the decoupling argument. Either Russia needs to diversify and engage in reforms, or investors will inevitably take their economy high. Oil prices stop to investors keen up prices. They will buzz sold at 128. Well, the world is concerned about the oil price of the Russia, the largest foreign investor, Russia, needs to the index of the growth investors not in worse work with us because of the corruption. Index is high means there's no risk of your reforms. The only answer Margaret has reforms that economic reforms have with high prices that empirically is not because they don't transition.
You didn't have the World Bank evidence, right?
No. I said they're on site, but I sent the book to the card. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Starts at 10:15, third floor, as ever. And I'm just going to say that the afterlife's like, I'm gonna come with it. I'm not messing around, okay? Tonight is going to be about the history of, well, I'll back up. I asked all the Hoya Spartan scholars before the camp started what they wanted an afterlab on, and the most popular answer was the history of various Latin American countries and how it connects to contemporary critical issues. And tonight I'm going to do that as it relates to the history of Cuba. I'm not going to do like Mahoney style, like way back 1920s, okay? All right, but contemporary history of Cuba as it relates to the neoliberalism K, affirmative and negative. It's going to start at 10:15. You're all invited. I turn it back over to Bo Battery.
Nice. All right, so Colin's got to make a judgment call about what he's going to go for. Share with the group, after raising your hand, what is one thing that he needs to think about as he's making that judgment call? This is hard, right? One of the hardest parts about debate is giving the 2NR, deciding what to go for, deciding what strategy to settle on in the debate. There's a lot of variables. What's a variable that Colin needs to consider?
You need to consider how big is the solvency.
Okay, so he's got to decide how big the solvency deficit is to the counter plan, kind of what solvency deficit exists, if any, how big it is. That's one variable. What else has he got to figure out as he's making this decision? That's it? I don't think that's it. Ayush. Yeah, so he's got to figure out, all right, well, how much net benefit do I really have here? How much of this China stock power thing am I going to have going on if I go for this to the 2NR? Can the affirmative beat that? That's a good question. What else? Connor. Yeah, what if he just goes for the status quo? What is the 2AR going to say? What advantages is the 2AR going to key in on? And how much can the 2AR realistically win of the case if he defends the status quo? I like that question. What else? That's it? That's not it. Ayush, tell us that again. Okay, explain. So what's the larger question?
So I guess whether the impact to the, or the internal link to whether oil is more key to the rest of the economy or
Step it up even more generally. How much what is there? How much just that is there? Exactly. So he's got to figure out, kind of in his head, he's probably thought about all those things in the first like 15 seconds of prep time. He's already decided long ago, while Remco was talking, what he was going to go for. But he had to make a series of mental calculations based on his read of the debate. All right, if I go for the counter plan, what are they going to say? How likely am I to win the debate? If I go for the DA, what are they going to say? How likely am I to win the debate? If I defend the status quo, what are the case advantages that they still have alive? Which one's the most credible? How much case are they likely to win? And he's got to make a call about what he's going to go for. What case advantages, what case impacts, not case advantages, what case impacts are still alive at this point in the debate for the affirmative? Make a list quick and then raise your hand and share it with the group. Really like to hear from some of the people that are not sharing with the group. This is a pretty easy one. What affirmative impacts are still alive after the 1AR? They're not all alive anymore. Some of them have passed away. What do you got? All right, biodiversity. Do we agree that that's still in the debate? Okay. What else? Yeah. Global warming. We agree on that one? Global warming still in the debate. All right. What else? China. What's the impact? China resource wars. That's still in the debate. Anything else? Okay. We're ranking those. Go ahead. What? Econ, which is related to what? So two kind of separate internal links to the economy. If we're rating those, which of those is the most threatening to the negative? Which of those is to say the other way, which of those is strongest for the affirmative at this point in the debate? What do you think, Mom?
Well, Sharon did the impact based on the warming impact at the very beginning. So I kind of set up possible experiments.
So that clues you in that maybe the affirmative thinks their warming impact is the best impact. What do you think, Dylan? affects the counter plan. Okay, I like that. Those are credible. What are less credible impacts? Biodiversity. Okay. What else? Here. You think their econ is less credible. Explain why you think that. Uh-huh. Yeah. So I think that's the. I'm kind of with Harry on that one. I think. So that's the case. Now think about the disad and the counter plan. Think about which one you think the negative is in better shape on, or which one the affirmative is in better shape on. Who thinks that the negative? Raise your hand, and don't worry about what the person sitting next to you thinks. Who thinks that the counter plan and the counter plan's net benefit are the better negative option at this point? Who thinks that the status quo and the Russian oil disad is the better negative option at this point in the debate? Okay. We're pretty divided. I think we got more people on board with the counter plan, but we have a lot of real good debaters with real good strategic senses who are thinking that the status quo and the Russian oil disad are the best option. I think this is not a super easy 2-hour decision for Colin. He's going to have some regrets regardless of which one he picks, but it's important that he picks. How many of you would suggest to Colin, if we gave the opportunity to give him a little pro tip here, that he go for both the counter plan and the Russian oil disad? Who would suggest that? But he has two good options, right? A lot of you thought that he had two good options. You would suggest that? Just go for both? It's too hard to let go of either one. It's too hard of a decision, right? You know, you all laugh. Colin's obviously not going to do that. Javi, what do you got?
I know that won't do that, but why wouldn't the disad be net benefit for the counter plan? Because isn't the one face off from the US going to Cuba?
No. Just based on getting more oil. No, definitely not that. Okay, so the larger less is true though. Colin at no point considered going for both of these arguments in the 2NR, and that's because he's learned that he needs to make choices as a second negative. Some of you are still at the point where it's real hard to give up on stuff. It's like, you know, if he kicks the DA, it's like, well, Margaret spent all that time developing the disadvantage, and she was doing such a good job of explaining the impacts of the disadvantage and answering all those line arguments. It'd be such a shame if I didn't go for those arguments in the 2NR. If he kicks the counterplan, he's like, oh, I was working so hard during my 2NC to develop the counterplan. I read a lot of cards, I made a lot of smart analytical arguments, I felt like I was doing so well. It'd be such a shame if I selected the status quo and the Russian oil disad, but he has to make that choice because if he doesn't choose, the affirmative is going to win 99 times out of 100, maybe 100 times out of 100. Let's move away from what you think he should do, and let's figure out if we have any reason to believe that he will do one thing or the other. Who's got a spider sense that, based on something that happened in the debate, they know what Colin's going to do? They got a sense. They talked to him before. They just kind of know. They know Colin. They know what he's doing. Or they saw something happen in the debate. They're like, ooh, I think I know what the next going to do. What do you think I would do?
I don't know the counter plan because UNC decisions are those cards about solving impacts to the damages he doesn't solve. Kind of like makes me think that he really wants to go for this counter plan.
Yeah, so he really wanted to. It seemed like he liked it, and so maybe that tips you off that if it's possible for him to go for it, he's going to go for it. Now it's kind of his A strategy all along. What do you think, Munoz?
I think that coupled with the fact that like Colin is really slim on the solvency page, that he doesn't have to spend much time on relations, and he has like an external Taiwan war impact which was dropped, so like he can weigh that versus the disads to the counterplan pretty easily.
Okay, so you just see kind of things are working out for him if he goes for the counterplan. Does anybody have a different sense or a different reason that they sense the counterplan is going to be in this speech? Connor, what do you think?
I think all the way back to like the 1AC prospect, you see that Colin was governor, like a secondary question, why is the OSG?
Yeah. Yeah, it seemed like Colin was pretty committed to this strategy from the beginning. There were several, they just kind of, the arguments that they selected, the way they balanced the 1NC on the case, some of the cross-examinations, kind of the depth and the foresight that he had in the second negative constructive about setting up the 2NR on the counterplan. I think all of that pretends that he might be going for the counterplan. So who thinks that maybe he's not? Maybe that was all a ruse. What do you think, Colin?
Well, I saw that he was having
Ooh, all right. So think about that. So Molly's sitting in the front, but I think you all can see the two of them. In the beginning of the cross-sex, they were kind of consulting, and what was happening?
Just having Margaret reach into the Harvard session and just talking about, I guess, like the history of one another.
So if you were Liam or Sharon and you looked over to the opposing table and you saw them consulting, you might think, maybe Colin was consulting because he needed some information about the Russia dissent, because that was the decision he was going to make. I like that. Always being aware of what your opponents are doing can sometimes really reveal it. Nikhil, what do you got? Like, could that exist if the status quo is what he's defending? That's your question? Like, did it become a full dissat, or is it just an advantage to the counterclaim? That kind of question? Okay. Anyways, we'll see. Colin, what do you think? Yeah, no, that was good. So he was reading other Colin the whole time. Can't go for solvency and win the Russia dissat. Pretty smart. If he was feeling good about solvency, then he's probably feeling good about China and not about the Russian oil dissat. What do you think the most important thing is that Colin is going to do during his prep time? So number one, obviously, is make this decision. What's the second most important thing that Colin is going to do during his second negative rebuttal prep time? Harry, what's the most important thing? Second most important thing. Yeah, so he's got to really think about how he's going to start the speech and how he's going to explain kind of his negative ballot and what that negative ballot represents and why that negative ballot is good. And he's going to try to anticipate, all right, I've made my decision, this is what I'm going for. What might Liam be working on over there? Liam is scribbling away, he's working on a 2AR ballot. He's thinking ahead, what is that ballot going to be and how can I undermine that? So he's going to spend a lot of his prep time kind of making sure that he gets the big picture explanation really, really solid so that he is closing the door. Understand? Can't hear you, sorry. What is the disadvantage to the permutation that Cuba says no? I'm not sure. I think he's going to say something about soft power and the perception of imps or whatever. I'm not totally sure. I mean, maybe we'll see.
The stage is behind you. Sorry. Yeah.
Russia. China.
The United States. 3 very large countries. But now, for real, the order.
Then solvency. Relations. Oil.
Y'all are so annoying.
Alright, settle down.
Is Colin toxic? Check out my 6-foot Spartan bracelet. Yeah, it's just a fact.
All good? Why have I peered? There aren't any 2 in our cards. Is everyone good? First, they put less work into this debate than Anthony Obuli puts into his job. Now the oil dissent. First we can see the Russian economy is resilient, which means there's no terminal impact. Also, we can see the Saudis check out oil price spikes in the status quo, which solves the terminal impact of their oil industry collapse impact on the case, because Saudis would be able to fill in for U.S. decline, which means there's no terminal impact to their Russia turns down the China soft power to settle waste and turns case Chinese economic decline causes massive instability throughout Asia through refugee flows, leading to lose nuclear weapons, causing terrorism that turns case and escalates global nuclear war that draws in China. That's our play to MC economic decline causes Chinese lash out to annex Taiwan, which escalates to global nuclear war. We conceded their terminal impact card from the 1AC. That's a U.S.-China war would escalate. Their 1AC evidence specifically about a confrontation over Taiwan. That's our low their evidence. We have an internal link defense to their scenario, which is about resource wars, a theory that makes no sense, which means we are the only team that has an internal link to a full-scale U.S.-China nuclear war. Now, Chinese South power also turns terrorism, which means that even if they don't solve their own terrorism at the end, there is an external terrorism impact that they have not answered. China guarantees that international cooperation will solve terrorism and proliferation. That's our crowd. What's evidence that escalates global nuclear war. Now, China solves warming as well. They plan boost the plan may boost Latin American relations, but it does not solve overall warming because they can't get all huge polluters on board like India and China. Only the Chinese soft power will be able to get those countries on board because it's about predicated off China taking action because they're going to be the world's largest emitter in the next few years. That's our CSI's evidence, and as well as warming is super long-term before short-term collapse of soft power, which leads to Chinese economic collapse. Now the line first is a permutation do both. However, there's no net benefit to the permutation. They concede that soft power is zero-sum evidence in case that the U.S. and China are competing against each other in the region, which means the plan would necessarily trade off with Chinese soft power. The permutation would do so as well, which means there's no net benefit to it. Now the Chinese tech bad evidence, they have zero evidence that says why specifically Chinese technology is better. Her evidence says that China can fund oil technology and buy the best on the global market. They have not read a card that says that China would be excluded from buying the best oil technology in the global market and then giving it to Cuba. She evaluated counterplan solvency through the lens of sufficiency. As long as we have as long as there's a good shot that the counterplan solves it, even if it's not as good as the counterplan, even if it's not as good as the plan, you should vote negative. Now they say they say China's net worth for the environment. However, their evidence is not applicable to oil drilling or Cuban the status quo. It's about Amazon, which has nothing no relevance to this debate, and there's no terminal impact to that. Now their economy turns. They have conceded the argument. They have no reasons why trade deficits or economic reform, the lack of those two things, is going to collapse the global economy. There's no internal link to their small little tiny turns that are based on undermining the Latin economy and the global economy, which means there's no impact. Now extend across our argument. Also, the U.S. economy is resilient, which means even if the Latin American economy suffer a recession, the U.S. would bounce back because it has a bunch of other global trading partners would be able to rely on. Also, the Chinese model is probably better than the U.S. global economic growth model in the status quo. That's proven by the fact that we had the recession and that we have really slow growth after the recession. Now the China the China war scenario, which is literally no specific scenario. This is a two-sentence card that has no explanation, no warranted analysis about why China and the United States would go to war, prefer our terminal impact defense to resource wars. The reason why they would not escalate global nuclear conflict. This card is literally not warranted. It's not an argument. They say that it's not key, that soft power isn't key to their economy. It's key to preferential trade agreements, which allows China to sustain their economy. Now the solvency flow, say no is the reason why they lose the debate. I spend at least a minute on this in the 2NC, and Sharon spends 15 seconds here in the 1AR. We have evidence from 2013, which is 3 years newer than their one piece of evidence. It assumes the status quo opinions of Cuba's opinions in the United States. They do not trust us in the status quo, which means they would perceive the plan as U.S. acting against its own self-interest, not as an olive branch to increase relations with China. Increase relations with Cuba and the status quo. The 1AR's only warning is that there is an economic incentive for Cuba to say yes. However, that is solved by the fact that there are a whole bunch of other international actors that are solving and have better relations with Cuba and the status quo to increase their oil drilling, which means they have literally zero incentive to say yes to the United States, which they perceive as an enemy, and they also perceive that painting the United States as an enemy as being necessary to sustain their own domestic stability, which is necessary for the regime to change. Now, feel free to vote on presumption because the risk of the F is so minimal because they can concede a much more warranted analysis about why they would say no, and they cannot concede, say no, and go for the permutation because that means the counterplan would go away, and you would vote negative on presumption because there's no risk of the affirmative. Now the relations advantage. No U.S.-China resource war is counterproductive. It would collapse their own economy, which makes no sense. Our victory evidence indicates that there's literally zero empirical analysis that supports the theory of resource wars. International markets would be able to solve functions, would be able to solve them getting oil much easier than them starting a war with the United States. They're crap on this now, the warming advantage. They can't solve warming. They have not explained a scenario in which increasing oil production to status quo would then later be able to solve warming in the long term. There's no warranted analysis, and if you don't get explanation out of the 1AR on that, you should allow new 2AR explanation. Now, extended across our terminal impact events. Marge reads a few good cards in the 1AR that indicate there's the environment is inevitably going to adapt to these, and it's going to be resilient to warming, which means there's not going to be broader economic, not going to be broader environmental collapse, which means no extinction scenario.
All right, Liam is going to take a few minutes to repair his 2AR. The negative speeches have concluded. Round of applause for negative. Anshuman clued us in. Stay with us. Your judges have to pay attention to a debate this long. 6 times the term in the prelims, several times the term in the elims, and they managed to do it. Relax. Anshuman clued us in to a possibility that I'm not sure that Colin really thought that through totally. I think Anshuman might have tipped him off a little bit because he kind of explicitly answered the act ballot that Anshuman previewed, which I thought was pretty cool. And he incorporated an argument about presumption and about judge picking the counterplan and about the soft power net benefit and how that interacts with the permutation. That was pretty good stuff. If that was a ballot that Liam was thinking about, maybe that's not my main ballot, but maybe I want to give that one a shot. It's tougher now because Colin explicitly previewed it and explained his response to it. What was the best connection moment in the second negative rebuttal?
I thought this thing the other day where he was like, their only answer is that there's economic incentive to cooperate, but they're going to have to solve.
What was so powerful about that for you?
Because he sort of blocked it, he only wanted to go for it, and then highlighted the level of explanation that's much better.
Yeah. So there were moments in this webinar where Kann got probably too far in the direction of just kind of like, they haven't said anything, their evidence is terrible, they got nothing on this, they got nothing on that, they got nothing on this other thing. But the moment on the real important argument, which is a really important argument for who wins the debate, he didn't just say, they got nothing. He said, here's what they got, here's what they would need, and here's why what they got isn't what they need. And that was a really powerful moment because it's much easier as the 2A to answer a second negative that's like, your evidence is terrible, it didn't say anything, or you didn't have an argument here. Because the 2A can say, well, no, we have an argument here, here's what our argument is. It's much harder as a second affirmative to respond to a 2NR that says, all right, here's what the affirmative has said so far in the debate, here's why what the negative has said so far in the debate is vastly better on this issue than what the affirmative has said. Because it limits the 2AR's options and it connects that 2NR moment to everything that happened in the negative block. And if I was Colin, I would want to remind the judge of the negative block because the negative block was really strong. The negative block was in a lot of depth. And in the last negative speech, I want the judge to remember my 2NC and my partner's 1NR, not just the things that I'm saying in my 2NR. So I agree with you, man. I thought that was quite a strong connection moment. If you were critiquing Colin's performance, if there was one thing that you would say, hey Colin, that was a great speech, here's one thing that I think you could have done a little bit better, what would the thing be that you would say that Colin needed to do a little bit better? Yeah, what would you say? Put the impact calc higher up? It was too far down? Do others agree with that as judges? You would have liked it if some of the impact arguments were up a little bit higher, you meant?
Well, I just wouldn't have kicked the dissad first.
Okay, yeah. So one thing that he did is he put the dissad first, he kicked the dissad, and then he started talking about his offense. If he had started talking about his offense first, then that first moment of the speech would have been an explanation of why to vote negative. He could have previewed why the affirmative might be saying to vote affirmative and kind of undermine that ballot. And he can kick the Russia dissad at any point. He can kick that at the end. He doesn't need to start his speech on the kickout. So that might be one thing that I would have wanted him to tweak a little bit. One thing that, he was very funny in making fun of Anthony Agbuli, but I don't know if I would want a joke about Anthony Agbuli to be the first thing that the judge gets for why to vote negative. right? It's funny, but it's not a reason to vote negative. So that joke could have been farther down in the speech, and it would have still been funny, but it wouldn't have been a replacement for the first thing that he said in the speech. So that's definitely something that I would have suggested. What do you got? Yep.
Does the neg disclose before the round?
Did the negative disclose before the round? I don't know. Who cares? Why do you ask?
Because they really need the evidence now. Like, I'm wondering if they read it with the jury. We know all the evidence.
The affirmative do the evidence well, the negative do that. Which side do the
They
evidence?
both knew it really.
Yeah, I mean that's just because they prepared.
We like.
They knew they were having this debate from 5 days ago or 3 days ago, something like that. But they've spent a lot of time preparing for it. So yeah. Ayush, what do you got? Okay, so the econ part, I mean, he had a lot to cover. He was really struggling to get through all that. That was a big 2NR. The part that you thought maybe a little more on is econ defense, econ resilient. You're thinking that's what Liam's thinking. Okay, I like that. Munoz?
I think he realized that he was going to win solvency, so relations was relevant, or most of it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that at that point he knew that the turns that they have were important. So I feel like he did better comparative analysis. But I think he also backed himself up even if he didn't win solvency at the top of the Gchat calc. He did that they said China solves warming, and then compares the internal links of the DISAD versus the app.
Yeah.
It's just China's a bigger polluter. They only get Latin American countries. They don't get China on board.
Yeah.
And that's comparative internal link analysis that goes far deeper than that.
So Colin's written a very layered negative ballot. He can win the debate. It's much easier for him to win the debate if he wins solvency. If he wins that the plan doesn't result in more investment, because Cuba will reject it. If he wins that argument, clearly the negative ballot is more persuasive. But he's also figured out a way to craft a negative ballot that doesn't rely on winning that. Even if the affirmative wins the solvency component of the debate, there's still a way that the judge could decide to vote negative. And he's kind of previewed what that reason would be. He explained it. He added another layer about presumption and the permutation. So he's really got kind of 3 layers of neg ballot. Anshuman. You're just obsessed with the permutation and the presumption?
Okay, so the 2 answers I had to the reasons that could see and say no against the time would not be a winner. Presumption, but I don't really know why I vote negative at least as of the speech on presumption and what would they use a counterplan or a counterplan.
Okay. So he needs a justification for his model of presumption, which is less change.
Then the second was the judge argument.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's not that difficult to prove why that's a bad model.
Okay.
And I don't know when the affirmative means those 2 things, that they don't just win on the permutation.
So you're still feeling like Liam should go for that ballot. You're feeling that ballot. Okay. Munoz?
I thought he answered it when he was just the counterplan goes away. Lack of a theory argument, but the affirmative in the 201AR is no judge kick or
Conditionality, right.
Means that I default negative because he has introduced that question first, and the affirmative has never challenged it in the first place that I could kick the counterplan, and I feel like permutations are a test of competition, so that would just go so.
Okay. So Munoz comes down differently on that. How many options do you think the affirmative has in the 2AR for kind of here's the reason to vote affirmative? Think about what you would say if you were about to stand up, like Liam's going to stand up, and deliver this 2AR. Think about what you would say. What would you start with? What would your framing for the debate be? We know what the possible negative ballots are now. Colin developed those negative ballots. There's one major one, and then there's kind of a secondary one if he loses solvency. And then there's even a third one if everything goes awry, and we end up back at permutation and presumption. Somebody preview what they think the affirmative, what Liam's going to say as he starts his 2AR. What do you think he's going to say?
I think he could maybe go for the solvency deficit to counterplan outweighs net benefit.
Okay, so solvency deficit to counterplan outweighs net benefit, kind of a basic blueprint for 2AR. That could be the beginning. Somebody tease out some of those details. He-Man. Or go ahead, different one. Yeah. Let's return back to that. Harry. Yeah, so warming might be highly featured in the 2AR. We had a sense of that already just listening to the 1AR and the way that Sharon allocated time and allocated kind of explanation resources heavily into global warming. So warming might be the thing that he begins with. Natalie?
I think after that, beginning with warming, which I think seems like the only offense that is, it seems like the best offense for the 2AR. He has to spend a lot of time somehow getting over this say no.
The say no thing, okay. Who thinks that the negative at this moment in the debate is in good to great shape on say no / solvency? Okay. Who thinks at this point in the debate the negative is in acceptable but relatively mediocre shape on say no / solvency? Who thinks the negative at this point in the debate should have just given up on solvency because they're not in very good shape on solvency? Okay. Who has no idea? Who doesn't know how to raise their hand? Oh, a lot of you. All right, great. Okay, seems like there's a split of opinion among those who have thought about it. You know, is he really far ahead on say no, or is he like just doing pretty solid on say no? I think anything less than that is probably unrealistic, but the affirmative might still be able to come back from that. And we're going to see, does Liam decide to take that head on and just come back and go kind of straight up in his framing, or is he going to try to dance around that somehow? All right, lock in, look at your flow, kind of get a sense, remind yourself what's going on. We got one more speech to get through here, and then we're going to talk about the debate a little bit afterward, and then you're going to head on over to the dorm. We're not going to have a ton of time, but please, at the conclusion of the second affirmative rebuttal, do not jump up out of your seat, do not start leaving, do not start packing up. You'll have plenty of time for that. Just stay seated. We'll give the contestants a round of applause. And I want to talk about a couple of things. You'll have plenty of time to get to Bailey, which is 3 minutes away before 10 o'clock. So please stay relaxed at all times.
All right. Order. Spills. Solvency. Relations. Russia. China.
Bless you.
Try to re-relax.
I usually just figure those in for tennis.
All right. Anybody not ready? Awesome. Spills advantages conceded in the 2-1. There are two impacts to this. First, the economic collapse independently. The oil spills. The next one will cause public backlash to the oil industry. That is conceded that independently kills the entirety of the U.S. economy, or evidence indicates that the U.S. will drag in people like Russia and China, which means that the Russia impact is also an impact for the affirmative plus. It means their China impact is inevitable. The second impact is spills causing change. That impact is conceded. The resiliency arguments on climate change cannot be cross-applied because that evidence is talking about how slow climate changes can be adapted to. Not a sudden injection of oil into the ocean means that independently causing extinction. They have conceded the entirety internally chain. The exception is the safety debate that will be on the counterplan. Solvency. The question is rhetoric versus reality. That is an evidence in the 2-1. Yes, they talk about grandstanding claims about Cuba hates the U.S. Yeah, that is fine. However, they don't have any evidence that speaks to their economic motivations. He just asserts that other countries will solve for the economy. They don't have a single piece of evidence or a warrant as to why Cuba would not accept a bunch of money from the United States specific to oil industry. All of our 1AC pieces of evidence specifically indicate that even if Cuba was not willing to do broader things to work with the United States, they would be willing to accept a removal of the embargo and accept U.S. oil money because it is beneficial for their economy. Or reality are, if you, I don't know if we're going to make you guys call for cards, but it's very decisive once you read those cards. Or the overall relations do not matter. I'm not going to go for the rest of the relations advantage. I'll explain that later, but all we need to win is that Cuba will accept U.S. oil money and investment. We have predictive evidence about what Cuba would say if we were to make this offer. Their evidence does not get to that claim. Now I want to talk about the say no debate. There's not an impact of saying no in the 2-1. Yes, he explains that Cuba will say no, but he does not impact how that affects the rest of the case. The say no arguments do not take out the counterplan because our 1AC evidence indicates that the U.S. already has agreements with Cuba that the U.S. companies can do emergency things. It's just not a proactively planned thing, which means that in the event of a spill, Cuba would be able in the event of a plan, we'll be able to say, oh, suddenly we spilled, U.S., we will now allow your oil companies to come in and do things that is sufficient to solve. Now, there is a double bind. If you buy, say no, that means that there's no link to the counter plan, and you kick it for them, but we still solve spills. But if you buy, say yes, we solve for all of the F, and then always the dissed relations. Not going for the warming impacts concede resiliency argument says no impact here or applied to China. It only applies to climate arguments. I was explained above. Now the impact in this debate. It is a very generic resource wars claims that countries do not want to fight over economic resources. There is a double bind. Either A, you should not apply this to our specific oil internally, which is specific to both U.S. and China war and U.S. and China oil war, or you should also apply it to their generic economy impact, because that is just as much a fight over resources as a fight over oil. Now, you should not apply to our oil advantage specifically because our evidence indicates that because the peak is coming, there will be miscalculation, and our lifter evidence that they have conceded their total impact claim to China war generally is only talked about an oil war, which means we have the only scenario internally to that means the impact of this is inevitable. Russian oil. The Saudi Arabia argument does not take out the geopolitics internally. Our evidence indicates that Saudi Arabia wants to maintain control over prices, but does not indicate that they will do things to give the U.S. oil to maintain geopolitical dominance. Additionally, if a bully effort is all we need to make you kick the dis ad, I don't know what that says about y'all. China, can you reset my timer? I set it for 8.
Here, 2.
Framing argument at the top. He does not understand the strategic arguments that one error makes at the top. That even if they kick this, we are impact turning Chinese influence. Even if they kick the counterplan, those are still disads against the status quo. They've conceded that our 1AC Ben Alvarado evidence indicates that, quote, the growing influence of China in the region is occurring now, which means that all of these disads are also disads to status quo. So if you buy the say no arguments, the fact that we have a risk of kicking China out of the region is also a reason to vote affirmative. Now, the counterplan is not solved case. We have a couple of arguments now down to the safety debate. U.S. experts are necessarily key. We have 2 independent works as to why Chinese net worse. First is the Gallagher 13 evidence that independently China is bad for the environment and warming. First is terms warming. Second is he says that it applies to the Amazon. No, it cites the Amazon an example of where China was a big meathead. However, this evidence says, quote, producing natural resource-based commodities brings major environmental risk when working with China, which means that the oil, I'm pretty sure, is a natural resource-based argument, which means it definitively applies to oil. The only argument to answer from the 2NR is this does not apply, which means since I proved it applies, it is a conceded argument as to why China would be net worse. The corruption arguments are also not answered in the 2NR. That China would be inherently corrupt means that even if he had extended the arguments about why Cuba is going to be safe now with the regulations, they no longer apply because China is going to get involved in their corruptive nature will make those regulations less safe because they have an incentive to ruin the environment because they quite honestly just don't care. It means that the drillers will not be safe in the status quo even if they have the technology. China has an economic incentive to cut corners. That's how there is a 31-to-1 ratio in terms of their products being cheaper. Now, really quick answering the impact calculus. First, he says time frame scale will concede that there's not a reverse causal scenario for soft power affecting economic trade ties. There's no explanation of how after the plan what country is going to stop trading with China and how their economy is going to collapse. It means there is zero time frame for this argument. It means that the fact that Russia is going to start drilling next year and cause spills in the region is a reason why we have a faster time frame. Now, he says that China solves terrorism, but the impact events was conceded. There's no motive for me. There's no impact to this. Now, he says long time frame, concede that. Additionally, the permutation, extended the permutation solves the links to net benefit. Yes, soft power may be zero sum, but he concedes the 1AR shift in the argument that was set up in Truth and Cross. Like, that is not a question of whether soft power is zero sum, but is trade with countries zero sum. They don't have an argument in the 2NR is to why China couldn't trade with Latin America and trade with the U.S. even if they don't have soft power in that region, which means the permutation to have China like talk to and offer these things to Cuba and have the U.S. do it means that maybe there's not Chinese soft power, but there's definitively Chinese trade with Cuba. Now, go down to the Latin American economy turns. I already explained above reasons why China has a trade deficit with them. However, the only answer is
most of the labs, I think, are going to request that you write a ballot. You're not going to have time to do that now. But what I would encourage you to do is make sure that you've got your flows together, that you got them labeled, and that you don't leave them here. Because as I look at the floor, there's a lot of flows going on the floor. So make sure you got your flows. Now, before we go, I want to talk briefly about how. You all right?
Yeah, fine.
All right. I want to talk briefly about how you would go about making this decision. So relax for a minute. We got plenty of time. Somebody let me know kind of what would be your process for figuring out how to decide this debate. Ayush, what would your process be? Okay. Shh. Ayush is helping you out. Okay. All right.
And then finally, that's it.
That's it, you think? Permutation, you got to figure that out. Okay. That's a lot of stuff. I think that's pretty good. I didn't write that down, so it's possible that there's something else that you have to decide. But there are a lot of decisions that you have to make as part of making your overall decision about who won. You could decide, like, all right, well, Colin made a joke about Anthony Aguli and he room checked me once, so I'm voting negative. But if one of your judges did that during the year, you would be very upset. You go, oh, that judge didn't try very hard. So you need to try harder than that, and you need to not vote negative because of an Anthony Aguli joke. And you got to figure out, all right, here are all of the different questions that I would need to answer in order to make this decision. I would need to figure out, what risk of the oil advantage does the affirmative win? I got to figure out what risk of the resource wars thing exists. I got to figure out if there's a solvency deficit. I got to figure out what's going on in this say no thing. I got to figure out the permutation and how much net benefit there is. A lot of stuff to figure out, and I got to figure out all of that. But then I also have to figure out how that fits together into an overarching decision. What I would encourage you to do is just kind of write out all of those questions, all the things that you're uncertain about, all the things you think you need to resolve, and then start resolving them, and then start to figure out how they relate to one another, and figure out if you can construct a decision tree where at the top is a single question that if you answer it will decide, all right, I answered it this way, so I have to vote negative, or I answered it this way and I have to vote affirmative. And this one's pretty challenging. This is not a straightforward decision. This is a complicated decision. So I would encourage you, while it's still fresh in your mind, as you walk over to the dorm, kind of figure out a little bit of that now, and then return to it after lab. Return to it tomorrow morning. But some of the labs are going to have votes in their lab. Some of the labs are just going to ask you to write a ballot. A lot of the labs are going to talk to you about the debate tomorrow. So don't just be like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to stop thinking about this. Keep thinking about the debate. Does anybody have any questions about something that happened in the 2AR that they would need to understand in order to make their decision?
What happened with the Russian oil deal? Like, what did he bring back up?
What did he bring back up with the Russia oil dissat in the 2AR? The turn, okay. What's the turn?
It's on Saudi.
Somebody explain the argument. What did he say about Russia in the 2AR? Nobody? Liam, what'd you say?
Saudi Arabia has an incentive to control prices, but not give the U.S. oil, so it doesn't resolve the scarcity scenario.
Other questions? That was a good one. You would need to know that, probably. Nothing? All right. I'm going to ask you to do two things. Number one, before you leave, I'm going to ask you to be very careful and to be very diligent about picking up. So just from where I'm looking now, I can see, approximately 6,000 empty things of garbage. Please pick that up. And number two, please give them one more round of applause.